get into the evidence given by Dr. B. Right, okay, who is here this evening? We've got Halo Jones, welcome to you. JC, thanks for joining us. Lenny Russell, thank you very much for being here this evening. Beautifully Fractured, also known as Donna, welcome to you. Thank you for being here. Marianne, thanks for joining us. Mish is here. David Zimmerman, welcome to you. Valor Hawks, thanks for being here as always. Athena, welcome to you. Tumbleweed, welcome to you. Elaine, the legend. The legend of the channel from back in the old Essex Boys days. Glad you could join us this evening. John, welcome to you. Nice to see you here this evening. Silver Fox, Michelle, Emma EFC, Mary C267, welcome to you. Who else we got here? We've got Louisa, welcome. Totem Crow, welcome to you. Right, okay, as I say, we'll play a very short video. Well, I don't know if it's that short, but it should be about 20 minutes, hopefully, which just gives a little bit of context to the case of Child P, and then we'll jump into Dr. B's evidence, again relating to that specific case. But before we do that, let's just create a little banner here so people know exactly what they're watching. No, that's the wrong one. Right, okay, so... 2 seconds while I just write this out. Okay. I think that's right. Yeah, looks all right. Okay. Prosecution, closing speech, Dr. B, evidence to follow. Right, that's all good. Who else have we got here before we kick off this evening? We've got Brenda Wilkinson, thanks for joining us. Gaynor, welcome to you. Leah J. Who else have we got here? Michelle, I believe I said hello to you already. I think that's pretty much everybody. JB, welcome to you. Right, okay, and also, before I forget, we have an $11.99 super chat, I believe that is, from Valor Hawks. $11.99. You know what that deserves.
Oh my God!
Just had to slip that in there. Right, thank you so much for that, Valor. Yes, and as always, we're going to be reading from the official court transcripts, which have been paid for by myself and the channel. If you do wish to support the channel in any way, shape or form, you can find out how to do that down in the video description box below. All help is greatly appreciated. Right, so let's get on with the video, and then I'll jump back in once it's finished, and we'll start with Dr. B's evidence in relation to the same case, the case of Child P.
We move on to the case of Child P. Dr. A told us that Child P was born in very good health. He needed no active resus, very little intervention. He was in normal room air from 6 minutes of life. Initially, he needed no respiratory support. He and his brothers were treated for presumed sepsis. The decision was made to stabilise his breathing through the use of CPAP and give him IV fluids for nutrition. You will remember that it was his case which caused confusion with several witnesses as to when it was he came off breathing support, and I will come back to that because it's important. On June 22nd, Yvonne Farmer looked after Child P, and he was doing so well that at 11:45 that day, Dr. B decided to have a trial of taking him off CPAP and trialling him on Optiflow. His gases were excellent. The following day, the 23rd, this is the day that child O died, at 0600 hours, child P was taken off Optiflow. From that point on, in other words 6 a.m. on the 23rd, child P needed no breathing support. By 10 a.m. at 36 hours of age, child P was self-ventilating in air. You will find that in the note of Dr. Cook at tile 64. His antibiotics were stopped, he was being partially fed with expressed breast milk, and both Dr. Cook and Dr. A referred to that examination at 1000 hours as unremarkable. So this is the morning his brother was murdered by Lucy Letby. At the end of the day shift, and after child O had died, at 1800 hours there was a further examination by Drs. Gibbs and Cook. When he arrived on the unit at the time of child O's death, Dr. Gibbs told you this. I remember feeling uncomfortable when I arrived on the unit and saw child O, and I thought, oh no, not another one, because I'd become increasingly concerned. I know that my consultant colleagues shared this concern. But I've been increasingly concerned at the accumulating number of unusual, unexpected, inexplicable deaths and collapses that have been happening on the neonatal unit, and the fact that staff nurse Letby had been involved in all of them. On examination, child P's abdomen was full, mildly distended, with no tenderness. And this was at about the time that Lucy Letby recorded feeding child P. You will see that in the fluid balance chart. You can imagine that, can't you, ladies and gentlemen, that with his brother having just died, with the consultants scratching their heads and worrying, looking at child P and wondering what was going on, that Lucy Letby would tell the student nurse to crack on with feeding his brother. You only need to put it that way to realise how absurd that is. Child P was active, he was tolerating his feeds. In interview, Lucy Letby said that she gave this feed because somebody was on a break. That's in the child P interview at page 3. Perhaps she was not anticipating that the police would be able to prove she was the designated nurse. Who can say? It's a variation from I was standing in for someone who was on a break to the student did it. It's just a morphing of her lies. Child P appeared very well. He was active. His CRP was normal. His breath sounds were clear and he had a normal respiratory pattern. There was a little redness around his umbilicus, which we were told was likely the result of the rubbing of the clip on the umbilicus. According to Dr. Gibbs, he was remarkably well, very well grown for a triplet, excellent for a triplet baby. And the plan was modified to a more cautious one because of what had happened with child O. A number of blood tests were undertaken at 1845, which is tile 145, and those blood tests would not normally have been done. But what they show us is that there is no evidence of infection. As a precaution, child P was put onto antibiotics. The X-ray ordered by Dr. Gibbs at 1800 hours was taken just over 2 hours later at 2009. It's the one I showed you earlier as I was getting towards the end of my review of the case of child O. When he gave evidence, Dr. Gibbs said that the abdominal distension shown was CPAP belly from 12 hours earlier. But he, like Dr. Yuko, had misread the chart. As I explained to you earlier, child P had not had CPAP for more than 2 days, and he had been off Optiflow since 6 o'clock that morning. One thing you can be sure of, ladies and gentlemen, is that was not CPAP belly. The abdominal gas shown on the X-ray was pumped into child P by Lucy Letby, just as she had done with his brother and with others, just as she did with child N, just before she went off shift on June 14th, so about a week and a bit earlier. And she did it just as she went off her shift to destabilise child P overnight, so that she could take advantage the next day, and create in the minds of all the people in the unit the impression that this was a child who was deteriorating. Professor Arthurs dealt with the radiograph. It's the one I've just been talking about, taken just after 8 p.m. It's at tile 173. He said, quote, "This is quite unusual in a baby of this age and gestation. You cannot determine how or why the gas got there from the radiograph alone." He can't. He's just a professor from Great Ormond Street. You can because you are the jury and you can take into account all the other evidence. You can take into account the circumstances in which this picture was taken. The fact that there had been no CPAP belly for more than 36 hours, no optoflow for 14 hours. Take into account the fact that the issue arose just as Lucy Letby was going off shift. The timing is no innocent coincidence because what happened here, as we will see, mirrors what happened to child N the night before Lucy Letby tried to kill him on June 15th. The night shift of the 23rd into the 24th. A detail which will not have been lost on you is that Lucy Letby did not leave the unit that night until about 9 p.m. We know that because she sent a message to Dr. A at 20:59 saying she was just finishing her notes. When Lucy Letby left, child P did not have an infection, and we know that from the lab results that came back several days later on June 29th. In the cross-examination of Dr. B, Dr. Evans and Dr. Bowen, some emphasis was put on the good blood gas at 20:27. No doubt in an effort to make the point that when Lucy handed over child P to Sophie Ellis, he was in good condition. But Sophie Ellis gave evidence on March 20th. She had child P that night. Toll 169 has her note, and I would like you to look at that, please, to remind you. She said, quote, child P desaturated and had a self-correcting bradycardia early on in the shift. As I said earlier, no innocent coincidence. Having had no problems with his feeds all day, child P had an issue with a 14ml part-digested milk aspirate at 2000 hours. If you want to look at the hard copy that you've got, it's J23981. So Lucy Letby is still on the unit at this point, remember? We say, quite simply, you can infer, given that it's a 14ml part-digested milk aspirate, that Lucy Letby had overfed him just before that was taken. What other possible explanation is there for that picture that day? No problems, and then just as she's going off, a part-digested milk aspirate. That, of course, is why she's so keen, Lucy Letby is so keen to persuade you that the 1800 hours feed was done by the student. A large volume aspirate. At midnight, a 20ml aspirate was obtained which was discarded, and the feeds were stopped on the advice of Dr. Maybury. Dr. Maybury said that at the start of the shift, the decision had been taken that if there were any concerns overnight, then milk feeds were to be stopped and intravenous fluids started. And in a phone call, he was told there'd been a milky aspirate, and he advised the nurses to put child P onto IV fluids. It was in light of the unexplained death of child O. There was a very low threshold for doing that. He thought that this happened at the start of the shift, somewhere at about 21:30, and thought he had spoken to Belinda Simcock. You'll remember that he was diverted by an emergency in A&E. You will also remember, I'm sure, that in cross-examination on behalf of Lucy Letby, the times were clarified by reference to the feeding chart. Dr. Maybury said that given child P's gut was clearly moving, from which bowels opened and passed urine, the figures of aspirate were not all the story. And he finally told us that he gave the instruction to leave the nasogastric tube on free drainage. At the invitation of Sophie Ellis, Catherine Percival Calderbank, or Catherine Percival Ward, said that she had gone into the room and looked at child P, who was awaiting a medical review. Again, initially, she thought that this was early in the shift, and she said, quote, he was a well baby, but his abdomen was quite distended, so I aspirated his NGT. And she made the observation in evidence that at the time she was looking for milk. She was then shown the feeding chart, which you've got there. It's that morning's feeding chart. So she was shown that feeding chart, and she confirmed that this was actually done at 0400 hours, as you can see the entry there. At 0700 hours, Sophie Ellis aspirated a further 5ml of air and 2ml of milk. She, when she was being questioned, wasn't sure whether the air had been there all along or not. But we suggest that if you think about it, the fact that she got milk at 7 o'clock shows that child P's stomach had not been fully emptied at 4 o'clock. That must be the case, mustn't it? Because nobody was feeding him overnight. So that gives you an idea of what was going on. Catherine Percival Ward confirmed that by the end of the shift, child P was, quote, comfortable, settled, and seemed like a well baby. So the problem that Lucy Letby had created at the end of the shift on which she had murdered child O had been resolved by proper nursing care from Sophie Ellis and Catherine Percival Ward. So we come to the day shift on which Lucy Letby murdered child P. Tile 258 shows you where people were. Catherine Percival Ward said that Lucy Letby needed support for the day shift, and that was why Chris Booth was with her in nursery 2. Catherine Percival Ward remembered having allocated Lucy Letby on a previous occasion to one of the less intensive nurseries, and Lucy Letby had said that being in nurseries 3 and 4 was boring. On those occasions, she said Lucy Letby would migrate, that's her word, migrate back to nursery 1 when things happened. That is something you have seen happening, isn't it, in the evidence? There was an occasion before June 2016 when Catherine Percival Ward argued with Lucy Letby about this, and Lucy Letby was unhappy with her decision. Now you know what was going on shifts when Catherine Percival Ward wasn't actually there. You have a much fuller picture of what was going on, don't you? At the shift handover, Sophie Ellis told the mother of child O, P and R that child P had been, quote, a little angel overnight. That was agreed evidence. We'll come to Sophie Ellis' note in a moment, but later that morning the mother of child O, P and R was called back to the neonatal unit. Lucy Letby had come on duty and child P had collapsed, just like his brother. As the mother of child O, P and R said, it was like déjà vu. We suggest that child P's case shows the malevolence of Lucy Letby at its height. Lucy Letby had handed over child P to Sophie Ellis in the aftermath of the death of his brother, child O. Just before she did so, she did something to destabilise him, and on her way home she sent that text, which I showed you before. Worry as identical. This is gaslighting at its very best, or very worst, isn't it? She was laying the ground for her attack on child P. What had happened overnight with child P, as I say, mirrored what happened with child N. Tile 249, please, from child P sequence. Sophie Ellis note made at 0639. Abdo has been soft and non-distended. 25 millilitres of air aspirated by Kate Ward, NGT placed on free drainage. There was nothing wrong with child P by the end of that night shift. The NGT was on free drainage, which means that if there was any naturally occurring gas in the stomach, it would ventilate through the NGT. Sophie Ellis had fixed the problem, but because Lucy Letby had decided that child P was going to die, and because she wanted people to believe that there was some sort of issue that the brothers had in common, she decided to use the template that had been established the day before. If we look at Lucy Letby's nursing note for child P at 8 o'clock on June 24th, quote, abdomen full, loops visible, soft to touch. That, of course, wasn't written until quite some time later that day. 13 hours later, as a matter of fact, that was written. It was a fabricated note to create the illusion of the ongoing problem, the problem that hadn't existed at 0640 that morning. When you're looking at that note, ladies and gentlemen, do you remember what Sophie Ellis had written the day before as she signed off child O at 7:32? What she had written was, abdo looks full, slightly loopy. So it's the nursing equivalent of copying somebody else's handwriting. So the problem that had disappeared overnight had apparently reappeared immediately at the handover, out of nowhere, in a child whose nasogastric tube was on free drainage. If child P really did have an issue at 8 o'clock that morning, we suggest that Lucy Letby would have escalated it immediately, given what had happened to child O the previous day. But she didn't escalate it because there wasn't a problem. There was nothing to escalate. She was texting Dr. A at tile 267, please, at 8:19, quote, watching them both like a hawk. This is after the time that she is putting into the nursing notes as child P having slightly loopy bowels. If you look at the text she sent just before that, at tile 264, she was telling Dr. A, quote, I've got child P and child R. so babies P and R. No mention to her friend that there's a problem with child P. If there really had been an abdominal issue, given what had happened to child O the day before, she would have told him, wouldn't she? You know from the other evidence she was desperate to get him into the unit. There was no problem. And this plays in due course to child Q, doesn't it, right at the end? Do you remember? She said this: "The reason I didn't feed child Q at 9 o'clock is because I was going to escalate it to the doctors." The same thing is happening time and time again. Dr. B spoke to Dr. Maybury about child P's overnight abdominal distension at the handover, and there was no suggestion of the fact that it was an ongoing concern. And yet in interview, you'll find it at pages 6 and 7 of the child P interview, Lucy Letby said that the bowel issue was obvious at handover, and she was told by the nurse in charge to wait for the ward round. A lie. Cover for her lying nursing note entry and lies to the police about it. Chris Booth, who was looking after child R, who was incredibly stable, fully monitored, and in the far end of the nursery where an eye could be kept on child R. Child P was on no sort of respiratory support. How does that fit with what Lucy Letby was saying in the note? How does it fit with what she was saying in interview? At 9:35, and this is tile 289, Dr. Yuko did a ward round and examined child P. He found a moderately distended abdomen with bloating. And you'll remember that in cross-examination, Lucy Letby said that the loopy bowel had been visible at this examination. And she claimed initially that Dr. Yuko saw the loops as well. But then we checked the note, do you remember? And there it wasn't. No mention at all from Dr. Yuko. Dr. Yuko said that child P's abdomen was soft on examination and that his skin was slightly mottled. Dr. Yuko ordered a series of blood tests, including ammonia, which was to deal with the possibilities of a metabolic condition. And Dr. Yuko's impression was that he needed to keep an eye on child P, although he wasn't particularly unwell. Dr. Yuko's principal concern seems to have been the possibility of an infection or NEC, but there were no other concerns. Dr. B said there was nothing of concern, although the abdomen was a little bit distended. And although she didn't examine child P, Dr. B suggested screening him to include a test for metabolic disorders, which ties in with what Dr. Yuko was telling you. Dr. B then went to speak to the coroner about child O. Here we have yet another example of Lucy Letby falsifying the notes to make the situation of a baby look worse than it was. In the nursing note, recorded after child P's death, Lucy Letby recorded that child P had been neopuffed for a minute before he was examined by Dr. Yuko. We suggest this is a deliberate misrecording, timing a minor collapse 10 minutes before the major collapse at about 9:40 or so. The record, abdomen becoming distended, is Lucy Letby's way of covering what she did. It was becoming distended because she was pumping child P with air. Dr. B said in terms of what Dr. Yuko had seen at 9:35, it did not explain why 10 minutes later child P crashed, his heart stopped, and so did his breathing. And this is deterioration number 1 for child P. Chris Booth recalled the monitors going off for child P and said that Dr. Yuko and Dr. A were around with himself, Lucy Letby and Rebecca Morgan, the student, in the room. And he described child P as dusky and mottled. But we suggest, for reasons that will become apparent, that he was wrong about who was there when this happened. Tile 295, please. This is Dr. A's note. This shows that he was called to the neonatal unit and arrived at 9:50. Apparently, it wasn't an emergency. It was just come quickly, as he put it. Child P was in nursery 2 with a heart rate of 80 beats per minute, oxygen sats of about 60%. He was being bagged in air. Dr. Yuko and Dr. B were already there when he arrived. According to Rebecca Morgan, when child P collapsed, she was at child R's incubator in nursery 2. And Lucy Letby was not in the room, according to Rebecca Morgan. Well, if that's right, you might wonder why not. Lucy Letby had no other child to care for. Child P had only just been desaturating and might be thought to have been at risk given what had happened to Child O. And Lucy Letby, after all, had been telling her friend the previous night that she was worried as they were identical, and had told Dr. A that she was watching Child P like a hawk. So if Rebecca Morgan is right about that, then we have shades of what was going to happen with Child Q the next day, don't we? Being out of the room at the time of the collapse. When she arrived, Dr. B said that only Dr. Yuko and Lucy Letby were there. She made a note at J23848. Dr. A said that the heart rate was lower than he would have expected, as was the oxygen saturation level. Child P was intubated at the first attempt by Dr. A, and there was good colour change on the capnograph. The blood gases were poor and suggested that over the previous 15 or 20 minutes, Child P had been working hard with his respiration. Dr. Yuko thought he was called back at about this time as well. He said Child P appeared very different to earlier, and his oxygen levels were down to 60% with a low heart rate. He said Dr. Yuko, quote, "Whoever was doing the neopuff was very keen on getting Dr. A." Well, we know who that was, don't we? We say that, knowing what you know, the person doing the neopuff has to have been the designated nurse, Lucy Letby. And Lucy Letby wanted Dr. A, and she wanted Dr. A because for some reason she enjoyed these situations when he was there. According to Dr. B, adrenaline was started at 9:55. And it was realised that intravenous access had been lost. So Dr. B and Dr. Yuko tried to recite a cannula. That was unsuccessful, so the intraosseous access was established. The gases at 10:06 were even worse, even though the airway was satisfactorily managed. Child P was given a sequence of doses of adrenaline at 9:55, 10:02, 10:08, 10:15, followed at 11:10 by a loading dose of morphine. The gas at 10:46 showed a slight improvement. Dr. Evans was at a loss to explain any natural cause for this collapse. Dr. Boeing concluded that this was a case of air being put down the NGT which had splintered Child P's diaphragm. And he will not have missed the fact that Lucy Letby's own note records, quote, "abdomen becoming distended." That's why it's important he was not on CPAP. This was her covering what she had done. These are all inferences you as a jury can draw. Experts can't get involved in determining the facts. You can. The second deterioration at 11:30. There was then an episode of bradycardia and desaturation, which required CPR from Dr. A and Dr. B. Child P was given adrenaline once more. Dr. B said at this time, following the collapse, Child P was, quote, "very vigorous and breathing against the ventilator." This was not a child who was ill, ladies and gentlemen. This was a child who was being sabotaged. That perplexed Dr. B because, as she said, if this was a case of infection, Child P wouldn't have rebounded so quickly. What she did not know, but what you do know, is that the blood tests exclude infection. Because he was fighting the ventilator, Child P was given pancuronium, the drug that paralyses, and you will find that at tile 389. It's in Dr. A's note, it's also in the scribe's note at tile 391, and it's timed at 11:30 in Lucy Letby's nursing note. See, for example, tile 292. This is really important, this timing, ladies and gentlemen. Pancuronium at 11:30. At 11:57, there was a radiograph, an X-ray taken which showed both a pneumothorax and air in the bowel. Dr. B said this was not a tension pneumothorax and the gas at 11:03 was good, although with a base excess that was quite high. Just after midday noon, after that gas, Dr. B remembered going to nursery 2 and seeing several nurses, including Lucy Letby. You'll remember she explained to you how she saw the clock going just past noon, and she told the people there that the transport team were going to be there soon. She said, quote, "I was thinking out loud," and Lucy replied to me, "He's not leaving here alive, is he? He's not leaving here alive." It wasn't disputed in cross-examination, was it? It was suggested in cross-examination that this was an expression of concern. concern. But that's not what Lucy Letby said in interview. In police interview, she said that she couldn't remember saying it to Dr. B. She claimed, Lucy Letby, that she wouldn't have said that unless Charles P. had been really sick at the time. She then said that when he started to deteriorate, she did think that he wouldn't leave alive. So in other words, Lucy Letby was saying that what Dr. B said she said at midday was something she didn't remember saying, but was thinking later on. Work that one out. In cross-examination on the 8th of June, Lucy Letby agreed when I suggested that to say such a thing was not the done thing in the medical world. And she repeated then on the 8th of June that she didn't remember saying it. So where did the suggestion made to Dr. B that this was an expression of concern come from? We will never know. Well, ladies and gentlemen, she did say it. She didn't dispute it. But going back to my favourite question, why did she say it? The answer? There is only one answer, isn't there? Because by this stage, she knew the end game. She knew what was going to happen. She was controlling things, she was enjoying what was going on, and she was happily predicting something that she knew was going to happen. She, in effect, was playing God. And Dr. B's response? Don't say that, he's just had a good gas. As Dr. B said, I thought we were winning. There was no reason for this comment. Dr. B said the comment was, quote, highly unusual and that making such comments was not something that we do. Dr. B said that that remark was shocking, and importantly we say you need to put this comment alongside Lucy Letby's later excitement after Charles P. had died. We will get to that. Before we get to that, most importantly in terms of working out who was responsible for what was going on, we get to the circumstances of Charles P.'s collapse at 12:28. Dr. B told us that the adrenaline infusion started at 12:20. This is the one that ties in with the pancuronium at 11:30. Dr. B and Dr. A took a quick time out and went to make a cup of tea when somebody shouted for help. They, that is Dr. A and Dr. B, were both out of the room when this collapse happened. And Lucy Letby, of course, was in the room with Charles P. Dr. B said, quote, it looked like this child who'd been paralysed with pancuronium had dislodged his ET tube. In cross-examination, Dr. B admitted of the possibility that the tube was blocked. Well, if it was blocked within a very short period of time, because it had been put in by Dr. A at 9:50. And when you're considering this piece of evidence, ladies and gentlemen, you're entitled to look at all the surrounding circumstances, something which the experts are not entitled to do. You can take into account the apparent coincidence of this happening at the precise moment that the two doctors had left the room. You can take account of the fact that it happened only when Lucy Letby was in the room, no one else in the room. You can take into account the fact that a short time before this event, Lucy Letby had said, he's not getting out of here alive, is he? And you can take into account the fact that that remark was made within 13 to 28 minutes of this incident. Significantly, Dr. A wrote that there was poor colour change to the capnograph. He didn't write that the tube was blocked because we suggest it wasn't blocked. Lucy Letby had moved it. As the nurse, Lucy Letby made no record of it being blocked because it wasn't blocked, and so Dr. A re-intubated. CPR was recommenced. Charles P. was given a number of adrenaline boluses for a peripheral cannula. The desaturation and bradycardia were accompanied by a profound colour change indicative of a circulatory problem. A chest x-ray at 12:30, and you'll find Dr. A's note at tile 435, showed a right-sided pneumothorax, which I think we saw just before, which was decompressed with a cannula, what you now know as a needle thoracentesis. Dr. A thought that a pneumothorax was a possible consequence of Charles P. fighting the ventilator at an earlier stage of treatment, and he was then given fluids and dobutamine to maintain his blood pressure and his cardiac output. Dr. Bowen thought that although the pneumothorax may have contributed to Charles P.'s collapse at this point, the collapse was not caused by the pneumothorax. We say, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, it was Lucy Letby moving the tube. Dr. Breary finished his cardiac clinic at 1300 hours. You'll remember he was the cardiac specialist at Chester. He conducted an echocardiogram at 13:30. Child P had a normal heart and normal great vessels leading from the heart with no evidence of any congenital heart disease or pulmonary hypertension. And in effect, he eliminated any heart problem as the reason for what was going on with Child P. The following week, Dr. Breary reviewed the circumstances of Child P's death. He could find no reason for what had happened, and he said that he regarded the events of that day as being very exceptional. Treatment for Child P continued with drugs to combat presumed infection, which we know didn't exist, and also to support blood pressure and cardiac output. Child P was given surfactant. The work and inefficiency of his breathing with no identifiable cause was a concern, and Dr. A said he couldn't identify any cause for what was going on. You'll remember that it was about 3 p.m, 1500 hours, that a pigtail chest drain was inserted, and Dr. A thought it was highly unlikely that Child P died as a result of complications with a pneumothorax. It was at 15:14 that Child P went into cardiorespiratory arrest, as Dr. B was standing in the room talking to Dr. Rackham from the transport team. This time, Child P was given high doses of adrenaline. The X-ray at 15:36 shows the pigtail drain in place, put in at 1500 hours by Dr. A. At 15:54, Child P had no pulse at all. He had no spontaneous circulation, and he was gasping occasionally. But despite all that, there was good air entry into his chest, so the ET tube, was in a good position, and that continued throughout the resuscitation process. Dr. Rackham said there was no breathing effort from Child P, and as he said, we had no explanation for why Child P's condition had changed. Another thing he said was, it didn't fit with any obvious reason for Child P to have deteriorated from the condition he was in before. So that's Dr. Rackham. It's the same thing. If I said to you, name the doctor who said that, you'd all possibly come up with different people, and you might all be right. At 1600 hours, it was determined that the resuscitation attempts were futile. The father of children O, P and R, Child P's dad, said that the circumstances of Child P's death were very similar to Child O's, although he said specifically he could not remember his veins going different colours like Child O. Again, as you have heard in many other cases, the father of Child O, P and R said they'd seen the boys, spent a bit of time there, and then things happened with Child P. So, a similar pattern. The father of Child O, P and R said that Child R, the boy who we suggest escaped Lucy Letby, had nothing wrong with him, and he was discharged from hospital after 11 days. And we say that's what would have happened with Child P and Child O had Lucy Letby not murdered them. After Child P died, Dr. B went to Child P's parents to tell them there would have to be a post-mortem. And Dr. B said at that point, Lucy Letby was, quote, almost very animated, asking about a memory box. She seemed so excited, said Dr. B, and her behaviour seemed very inappropriate. Lucy Letby was enjoying the drama. She was enjoying the control, and she was enjoying the extremity of the grief that she was causing to other people. Dr. B said that in the aftermath of Child P's death, the father was sobbing and begging Dr. Rackham to take Child R. And Dr. B too asked that Child R be removed from Chester because, quote, I thought that was the only way he was going to live. Dr. B was worried and she did not understand what had been happening. What she had seen defied her experience as a consultant, and it was not normal from a medical point of view to explain what had happened. Dr. Gibbs told us that he was extremely concerned to hear of Child P's death and that he wouldn't have expected it at all. Dr. Rackham decided that moving Child R to Liverpool was a good idea in the light of what had happened to his brothers. Child R, of course, was on high flow, he was pink and active. There was a debrief led by Dr. Rackham after Child P's death. This was to identify anything that had been missed and to look out for the well-being of the staff. And nothing was identified clinically to explain what had happened. At the debrief, Dr. Breary asked Lucy Letby how she was feeling and suggested that she perhaps needed some time off. But she didn't appear to be upset, according to what Dr. Breary said, and told him that she was due to work the next day. And that caused Dr. Breary real concern, given her connection to these unexplained events. We move on to the expert evidence. Dr. Marnaridis gave evidence on March 30th relating to the post-mortem of child P. And you'll remember the liver injury that he had, not as severe, but a liver injury nonetheless, like child O. Dr. Marnaridis told you that when he gave his opinion, he did not look at one child case in the context of another. And this is the important difference between you and him. It was suggested on behalf of Lucy Letby to Dr. Marnaridis that the liver injury could have been caused by CPR. Dr. Marnaridis was prepared to accept that as a possibility, looking at the case in isolation. We say, however, that not only is the coincidence too much for child P to have suffered that injury accidentally, but it's also clear that at the time those who were involved in his resuscitation were very careful in what they did. And the text messages sent by Dr. A to Lucy Letby, we suggest, exclude the possibility of child P's liver injury having been caused accidentally. More importantly, perhaps, Dr. Marnaridis said there was no evidence at the post-mortem of any naturally occurring disease or condition that would account for child P's collapse and death. He said that when he had the benefit of hearing what experts for both the prosecution and the defence said in a joint meeting, it was his view that child P died as a result of gastric and intestinal distension, as a result of having excessive air injected into the nasogastric tube. As he put it, there was no clinical or pathological pathway to explain a natural cause of death. And in that context, you will remember that his discipline, pathology, enables him to exclude natural causes for the air being in the stomach and the bowel. Right at the end of his evidence, he said that had an alternative mechanism been put to him on behalf of Lucy Letby in cross-examination, he would have considered it, and either would have accepted it as a possibility or explained his reason for rejecting it. And it will not have escaped your notice that other than the CPR in the case of child O and P, he was never asked to consider any alternatives. That, we suggest, speaks volumes. There are no alternatives. Dr. Evans took us through a summary of the chronology of child P's progress from birth to the collapses and his death. And his view was that there was no natural causes, and that the reason for what happened was that he was injected with air down the nasogastric tube. When he was cross-examined on behalf of Lucy Letby, it was suggested to Dr. Evans that he had invented an extra dollop of air just before the initial collapse. I think, to be fair, the word dollop originated from Dr. Evans. This, we suggest, is where the false entry in the nursing note made by Lucy Letby is so important. And this is something that we suggest that you as a jury can take into account. If you accept Sophie Ellis' uncontroverted evidence that there was no air in child P when she left at the end of that night shift, then you can go on to consider, first, that Lucy Letby made the loopy bowels note falsely, suggesting there was. Second, that she was texting Dr. A, claiming to be watching like a hawk at the time her later made note suggests there was air in the loopy bowel, but she didn't mention the air. Third, if there was no air, then her suggestion in interview that she had a conversation with the lead nurse about it must be a fabrication. Fourth, in her nursing note, she falsely recorded having used the Neopuff either before or during Dr. Yuko's first examination at 9:30. Fifth, if you accept Dr. Yuko's evidence about his 9:30 examination, child P was fine, and yet by 9:35, child P had collapsed. Child P had no naturally occurring problem that could have caused that sudden collapse. And so Dr. Evans was right. Dr. Bowen reinforced Dr. Evans' opinion by comparing the contents of Sophie Ellis' note at 6:39 with what Lucy Letby said was the position in the note you have on screen. Dr. Bowen also pointed out that in the interim, the nasogastric tube had been on free drainage, which would have decompressed the stomach if there was any naturally occurring problem. It's a point I think I made earlier. Dr. Bowen also pointed out the apparent discrepancy between Lucy Letby's notes, which suggest having had to neopuff child P just before Dr. Yuko's ward round, and the fact that this does not appear to have been mentioned to Dr. Yuko. After all, given what had happened to child O, if you had just neopuffed a child that you just called a doctor to see, as a designated nurse you would tell the doctor, wouldn't you? So the fact that that didn't happen speaks volumes. Given that in interview, Lucy Letby suggested that she was waiting for the doctor to do the ward round to raise the possibility of there being an abdominal issue, this is, we suggest, inexplicable, other than it being yet another example of a false record in Lucy Letby's nursing notes, designed to make Child P appear to have some naturally evolving problem which covered her criminality. Dr. Bowen described the pattern of extreme collapses necessitating the use of adrenaline followed by a rapid recovery as being very abnormal. It's a pattern of what was happening to Lucy Letby's babies. Dr. Bowen had decoded the adrenaline prescriptions, you'll remember, and concluded that the adrenaline infusion was doubled at which had been intended. But despite that, Child P's heart still failed. And because there was no plausible explanation either for the distension, the gas, or the nature of the extreme collapses, followed a couple of times by good recoveries, Dr. Bowen concluded that someone must have injected Child P with air. She did not take into account the liver injuries, which you can, or Lucy Letby's bizarre behaviour, which you can, or the fact that his brother had died in similar circumstances the day before, which you can, or the false records, which you can. So, ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution position. If you conclude that Child O is the victim of someone inflicting force on him to cause that terrible liver injury, then the very idea that his brother Child P died the next day with a liver injury is damning evidence against Lucy Letby. And it's the classic example of the power of circumstantial evidence, something which when viewed in isolation may not be very significant, which may be explicable in isolation, but when taken with another piece of evidence becomes powerful proof of criminal behaviour. Dr. B realised there was something seriously wrong going on in that neonatal unit. That is why she pleaded with Dr. Rackman. Lucy Letby predicted Child P's death at a time when the consultant Dr. B thought it was under control. How could she have done that? Why would she have done that? We say, ladies and gentlemen, that the number of coincidences here, both with what happened to Child O and with what happened to many of the other babies, is all too much to have been the product of simple bad luck. Child P and his brother Child O were murdered by Lucy Letby.
Okay, so let's just pull up Dr. B's evidence for a second. There we go. And remove the banner. Okay, yeah, and what I said earlier about this case being one where the jury came back without a verdict isn't correct. I did put that in the chat box as that video was playing, but this is a case where the jury found her guilty of a majority of 10-1. So she was indeed found guilty of this particular case. So just to clarify that. Thank you to Kaz49 for the £2 super sticker. Greatly appreciated. And Celeste with the £1.49. Thank you very much for your continued support. If you do wish to support the channel or become a member of the channel, you can find out how to do that down in the video description box below. Right, okay. Just going to catch up with the chat for a couple of seconds and then we'll start with Dr. B's evidence. I'm not sure entirely how much we're going to get done this evening. We'll try and get as much done as we can because, as I say, the more interesting stuff regarding this actually happens towards the end of this particular transcript. But we'll get through what we can this evening and we'll see how we go. Lucy Blue, welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. Vicky Maguire, welcome to you. Right, okay. Lucy's birthday. Not Lucy Letby's, surely. Can't be her birthday. Do you mean Lucy Blues? Oh dear. Oh, it is. It must be Lucy Blues. Yes. Happy birthday, Lucy. Many happy returns. Right, okay. Lorna's here whilst doing a little bit of Harry Potter cross-stitching. Fantastic. Right. Right, okay. Right, 2 seconds, and we shall start with the evidence of Dr. B. Okay. So, in the presence of the jury. So what I've done with this one, I've increased the font size to try and make it a little bit easier to read, and it's buggered up the formatting a little bit. So I do apologise for that, but we'll get through it as best we can. So, in the presence of the jury, Dr. B recalled examination in chief by Mr. Astbury, who's part of the prosecution. So, Mr. Astbury, good afternoon. Could we start with your full name, please, again for the record? She replies, I'm Dr. B. You remember, Dr. B, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up and generally in the direction of the microphone, which of course doesn't amplify, it only records. You came along last week to assist us with your treatment of a little boy called Child O. And you've come along today, as you know, to assist us with his triplet brother, Child P. She replies, yes, known as redacted on the medical records. You, I think, first met Child P during the course of a ward round on the 22nd of June 2016. Is that right? She replies, that's right. Thank you. I think that took place at 11:45 a.m. Yes. And you were paediatrician of the week. She replies, that's right. I'm going to ask, please, it's not on a carousel, but if Mr. Murphy can put up J23840, please. Then it says there's no video feed from the court, so he must have had a bit of technical difficulties. For 60 seconds or so, 2:12 p.m. it comes back, Mr. Astbury. Hopefully you recognise the writing. She replies, yes, that's right, that's my handwriting. Thank you. That's your note of the ward round on that particular occasion. She replies, yes. You have noted there triplet 1 as we know Child P to be. Yes. And you have noted the problems as they were considered to be at the time. Yes. And then you've made a note of the various categories that we're becoming familiar with. She replies, yes. You can see there that Child P had been screened and was receiving antibiotics. If we can scroll up and look at your examination, please. I don't think we need to go into too much detail on this, simply to identify it. We can see that Abdo was considered soft at that point. She replies, yes. You have made other notes. Was he on breathing support at that stage? She replies, no, he had been taken off. Had been on, so he was on CPAP at the time, at this point in time when I saw him. What I'd asked for, so you know where it says U and E plus gas and trial of Optiflow. So I had asked if we could step up. If we could step as a step down, If we could step as a step down approach in weaning ventilation, changing him to Optiflow from CPAP. So at the time when I saw him, he was on CPAP, and I'd asked for that to be changed to Optiflow. Is that a positive step for a baby in Child P's position? She replies, yes, that's a positive step. So basically CPAP is a form of non-invasive ventilation, which gives pressure and aids ventilation. Optiflow is just some flow with humidity, and as a method of non-invasive ventilation, it's a step down towards the next thing that would happen is you would wean to Optiflow and then take them off, which is what happened with him. Right, so let me just clarify what I said there. So we've got the doctor again. Yes, that's a positive step. So basically CPAP is a form of non-invasive ventilation, which gives pressure and aids ventilation. Optiflow is just some flow with humidity. And as a method of non-invasive ventilation, it's a step down towards the next thing that would happen is you would wean to Optiflow and then take them off, which is what happened with him. Mr. Astbury, thank you. We saw yesterday, indeed, I should tell you this, we've already heard in this case from Dr. A and a number of other doctors who treated Child P on the day we're about to deal with, so we won't need to go through those notes. In fact, we also heard, as a matter of fact, Optiflow came to an end around about 6 a.m. on the 23rd of June. She replies, that's right. The jury, I'm sure, will remember, just looking at those notes and bearing in mind the stepping down of the ventilatory support. What's your assessment, please, of Child P? Or what was your assessment of Child P during the course of that ward round? She replies, so from looking at the notes, it looks like I am fairly satisfied with his progress. He is one of the triplets and he is progressing as we would expect him to. He is on CPAP, we are planning to change his fluid, we're giving him antibiotics which we plan to stop. His examination is unremarkable. I've asked for some blood tests to check his kidney function, a blood gas and wean down his ventilation, and I am predicting that things will go to plan and there wouldn't be any problems with moving him out of the ventilation, introducing feeds and spending a time a period of time on the neonatal unit, what we call feeding and growing and establishing feeds, right, before being discharged. You mentioned blood gases. I wonder if I can ask Mr. Murphy to go to tile 178, please. I'm going to look at a blood gas record, please, because part of your plan was, I think, to take another blood gas record. Is that right? She replies, yes. So one of the things, if I could just clarify at the beginning, is in my statement I have mentioned that I reviewed his gases, which I have not documented here. But as part of the review, I would have looked at his observations, his temperature, his charts, whether he had opened his bowels, passed urine, what his temperature stability had been, whether he had had any periods of dropping his oxygen levels or heart rate. I would have looked at the blood gases that had been done before, which, although I have not documented, forms part of seeing the patient. Mr. Astbury. Okay, so as of the 22nd, having completed your examination and made your plan, all that information would have been in the mix and under consideration when you decided on the progress. She replies, that's correct. Thank you. If we can look at those blood gases there, there's one, if we look at the 22nd of June, just below the first of the hole punches on the page, we can see there's one at 12:17, not long after your examination of him. She replies, yes. Is there anything, and again I don't think we need to go into detail, you may be asked if it is necessary, is there anything that stands out on that particular blood gas reading at 12:17? She replies, no, this is what I would call an excellent gas. We can see there's a note suggesting progress onto optoflow. Is that right? She replies, that's right. And as it happens, we have another blood gas in the afternoon, which the entry suggests is once child P is already on optoflow. Again, bearing in mind the change in ventilation, is there anything we need to have our attention drawn to in that particular blood gas reading, record? She replies, no, again, this is an excellent gas, very similar to the one done at 12:17, and does not raise any concerns, and looks like everything is going in the right direction. His ventilation has been weaned to optoflow, and he seems to be managing very well with that change. Thank you. You next considered, certainly for the purposes of your statement, and I don't think we need to go to it as it happens, we've just seen it, you then considered the examination undertaken by Dr. Cook. Is that correct, on the 23rd of June? She replies, yes. Did anything concern you from what that particular examination on... Hang on a sec. Did anything concern you from that particular examination on reviewing the notes? She replies, no. Next, please, could I ask Mr. Murphy to go to tile 63? No, that wasn't in fact what I was hoping to go to. It'll be 64, please, Mr. Murphy, my error. If we scroll halfway down, I hope, scroll down, please, we can see there, just keep going. It's not a note that you completed, Doctor, but we can see after Dr. Cook's examination, it would appear that you've looked at what's called a CRUS, a cranial ultrasound scan. She replies, yes. And can you tell us, please, what you have noted as a result of the scan? She replies, that says normal appearance, and it says no, something, hemorrhage or dilation. Is that evidence of... And then the doctor says, so that's evidence of, that's the cranial ultrasound was normal, showing no features of concern. Thank you. So you're able to satisfy yourself that all was normal in that regard? She replies, yes. I'll stop there for a second. Have a little break. HM with the £9.99 super sticker.
Oh my God!
That is incredibly kind. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated, as always. Okay, let's catch up with the chat here. Yeah, I've seen you've written that a few times, Elaine. What is your basis for that exactly? What evidence do you have to suggest that Lucy Letby is a scapegoat? As I say, I've seen you write that 3 or 4 times now, but what, can you expand on that in any way, shape or form? Alicia, welcome to you. Let's have a look here. Morella Deville, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Hume Animal, welcome. Right, okay. Let's move forward. So, She replied, yes, and we've got Mr. Astbury, thank you. We've already heard from you about events during the course of that afternoon and early evening on June 23rd. We've also heard this morning, and you comment on it in your statement, Dr. Gibbs reviewed both Child P and Child R after the death of Child O that particular evening, and you have seen those notes. Was there anything, we're not going to go to them, that stood out to you, having seen those particular notes? She replies, no. Any concerns? No. Moving on then, please, to June 24th. Were you present at the morning handover? She replies, I was. This would have been the morning after Child O passed. Yes. What time would that handover normally take place? She replies, 8:30 in the morning. Do you remember having any conversation with Dr. Maybury, who had been the night registrar? She replies, so this is part of my statement. I don't remember it exactly now, but as I've mentioned in my statement, Dr. Maybury had said in the handover that he had been asked to review Child P overnight and felt that he had some abdominal distension and had, as a result of that, stopped his feeds and started him on intravenous fluids. Right? He was already on antibiotics from the evening before when Dr. Gibbs had reviewed him after Child O sadly passed away. Both Child R and Child P had been screened and started on antibiotics, more as a precaution, just to make sure that we were covering them for infection. We've heard, I think, this morning that the consideration is the fact that they are triplets, yes, so there is a potential for similar features to arise in siblings who are born in that way. She replies, that's right, yes. Child P, do you recall being changed to intravenous feeds as opposed to bottle feeds or milk feeds? She replies, so he had been changed. So his feeds, he was only having nasogastric feeds during the course of the previous evening when Dr. Maybury was asked to review him overnight. Hang on a second, is there missing out a full stop here somewhere? So he had been changed. So his feeds, he was only having nasogastric feeds during the course of the previous evening. When Dr. Maybury was asked to review him overnight, there were some concerns that he had had short episodes of desaturation and bradycardias as well as some abdominal distension. So I think, more as a precaution, given what had happened with Child O, Dr. Maybury rightfully decided to play it safe and stop the feeds and put him on intravenous fluids, taking into account that he was already on antibiotics. He also notes that despite these episodes of brief dips in oxygen and heart rate, he remained in air. So Dr. Maybury wasn't concerned and didn't think about putting him back on any form of assisted ventilation, and was satisfied that just stopping the feeds and managing it that way was the right thing to do, which I agreed with when I briefly reviewed him the next morning. Mr. Astbury, so at that point, you've just confirmed for us that Child P remained breathing for himself in air. She replies, that's right, yes. Dr. Yuko, I think you just mentioned, took a review at 9:30 that morning. She replies, that's right. Did you play any part in that review? She replies, my part in that was, so that morning wouldn't have been one of the days where we undertook morning ward rounds. However, when Dr. Yuko was reviewing Child P, I came and sort of cast an eye on Child P, just to make sure he was okay. And I don't remember noting anything unusual. I've seen Dr. Yuko's note entries, so at the time Child P was still in air. His abdomen was a little bit distended, he was on antibiotics. As far as I can remember, there was no major concerns as such. He was on caffeine as well, and I suggested to Dr. Yuko that we undertook some investigations just to screen for a few things. Those have been listed. There was a blood count, which is just to check his blood cells, a CRP to check for infection, a kidney function test to make sure his blood salt levels were okay, a blood gas, and an ammonia, which is basically a test that is done, a blood test which we send on ice to check for metabolic disorders. I think this was from the background of Child O having passed away the day before. So this is just thinking beyond, is there anything else we should be looking for? As part of that, I'd ask for, while doing bloods, can we do this as well? Do you recall how that particular examination of Child P came to an end? She replies, I did not examine Child P, so there is no note for me saying that I have examined him. Dr. Yuko has, and from the note entries, I have written, I think while I was seeing him, I was either, I don't remember this exactly, either asked by one of the nurses that was there that there was a... Hang on a second. I did not examine Child P, so there is no note for me saying that I have examined him. Dr. Yuko has, and from the note entries I have written, I think while I was seeing him, I was either, I don't remember this exactly, either asked by one of the nurses that there was a phone call from the coroner about child O. I was bleeped. I don't remember because the previous evening I had left my contact details on the answer machine about child O. So at about around the same time, I've been asked to go to... There was a resource room in the neonatal unit where we would take phone calls, which would be out of hearing. Mr. Asprey, just break that down then. Having been present at Child P's examination by Dr. Yuko, you then had cause to go to the resource room, was that? She replies, yes. To make a phone call? Yes. And your recollection of who that phone call was to? She replies, again, this is from the note entries. In my note entries, I have written that I was on the phone to the coroner, and again, I have been asked this by the police as to why I remember the conversation. And I have replied that I do not remember what the exact conversation I had. I do not remember what exact conversation I had with them. However, it would have been to do with a summary of the unexpected events from the day before with child O, and my filling in the coroner, either the coroner or the coroner's office, because I think you can confirm that from my statement who I spoke to, because this is documented in the notes. I updated them on the previous days. Okay, well, rather than concentrate on what exactly you were telling them, what happened while you were on that phone call? She replies, yes, so I was asked to come and quickly review Child P during that. And why was that? She replies, because again, he had suddenly become unwell. And that was literally just 10 to 15 minutes after I'd seen him. Okay, we've heard that was the start of a series of difficulties for Child P throughout the day. Does that accord with your recollection? She replies, yes. Did you make a note of your involvement through the course of that day? Later on that evening, she replies, yes. I'm going to ask you to look then at the note, please, Doctor, just to assist you. It's tile 625. It's quite a long note. I've gone to this tile because it's where all the notes are. But for the jury's help, it's spread out through the chronological order. But I have gone straight to this so that we can take it through. You've written, just identify, that is your note, yes. We should do that first, thank you. You have put, written retrospectively from around 9:30 a.m. You were called to nursery 2 because Child P was unwell, is that right? That's right. You have noted that Dr. Yuko and Nurse Lucy were present, is that right? That's right. Anyone else present when you got there? She replies, as far as I remember, no. Right, stop there for a second. That's 22 pages. We're making good progress. Right, just going to catch up with the chat for 2 seconds, so bear with me. Okay, let's have a little sip of the old organic Clipper green tea. And we'll continue. Right, okay. Oh my god, JB sliding in there with the $10 super sticker. Thank you so very much. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for that, JB. Right, okay. What's that? 10 Australian dollars, I think that is. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated, as always. Right, let's get back to it and continue onwards. We're making pretty good progress. Page 23 we're on now, so we're getting there. Right, so Mr. Asprey again. And you have noted that Child P was dropping his sats, that the saturation levels of oxygen in his blood And his heart rate had dropped as well. She replies, yes. Is that right? Yes. Mr. Asprey. Just a few minutes earlier, I had briefly seen Child P and discussed with Registrar to do... And I think you have listed those tests that you've already very helpfully told us about. I'm not going to go through those again. Shortly after this, Child P deteriorated. Dr. Yuko started to bag, and you have put, is that intravenous access ×1, lost as not flushing? She replies, that's right. Can you explain that, please, to us from your recollection? She replies, so basically, when I was called in to see, which was quite a shock, I saw that his saturations, I don't remember the exact numbers, we would probably have to go back to the charts to look at that. His heart rate was dropping and his saturations were dropping. In my statement, I think I've written that his sats were low and the heart rate was around 80, which is quite alarming because with any heart rate drop to 60, we start CPR, which is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. One of the first things you want in a child is you want to look at the airway. So you look at if they are dropping their oxygen levels, you start assisting them, which Dr. Yuko does. So he gets the neopuff and starts to bag with assisting that. And I look for intravenous access. He had one cannula in place, Child P, and as the further resuscitation comes and follows, that was lost fairly quickly because shortly after this, his heart rate dropped to 60 and we started cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And as part of the cardiopulmonary resuscitation, one of the drugs that's given is adrenaline. So the first, and then Mr. Asprey, I'm going to ask you to pause there because if it assists you, we've seen Dr. A's notes and he confirms that the heart rate was down to, as you said, 80 and SATs were down to 60%, which you're right, is in your statement. I think you were about to tell us that the heart rate dropped still further. Is that right? She replies, that's right, yes. So your recollection of how long it was before that took place, roughly? She replies, it probably wouldn't have been very long, maybe within a couple of minutes. Okay, we've heard it before, but you tell us what happens when it drops to 60 or below. She replies, yes, if it drops to 60 or below, we commence cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which starts off by external cardiac compressions. Excuse me. So because the heart output is not enough to oxygenate, you assist by cardiac compressions, and you give medication to improve the heart rate, and the medication that's given is adrenaline. Okay, pausing there. Did adrenaline start on this occasion? She replies, the first entry, as far as I can remember, is at 9:55, the first adrenaline. How was that administered? She replies, the first dose was intravenous. So normally we would give the adrenaline and then you would flush it to make sure that it goes into the, because it's only a small dose, it's 0.1 mil per kilogram. So he would have had 0.2 mil, which literally you need to give a bit more fluid to make sure it goes in the system. And the cannula, when I say it flushed, that's a swelling that comes up at the end of it, which tells you that you can't use it anymore because it's not going in the vein. The cannula has tissued, is the word that we use, so the IV access is lost. Having commenced the resuscitation procedure that you've told us about, access is vital. She replies, access is vital, absolutely, yes. So were you able to administer more than one dose of adrenaline via the intravenous line that was eventually to block? She replies, no. So what did you do then? She replies, we then proceeded. At this point, Dr. A had also come. So this now becomes more than one people. So one person is looking after the airway. I'm going to interrupt you again, I'm sorry. Do we take it from what you've said that Dr. A wasn't there to start with? She replies, he wasn't there to start with, but then he arrived and took over the airway management, took over the airway management over from Dr. Yuko. He put the Guidal airway in and started bagging, and we were getting ready for intubation. Around this time, the adrenaline was also given, the IV access is lost, and Dr. Yuko and I moved to this end to start. Somebody's taken a note of what you say, so I'm going to ask you to slow down. Lots going on at once. She replies, yes. Dr. A has taken over the airway. That's right. He's introduced a Guidal airway, which we've heard before. Yes. Preparations are being made for intubation. She replies, that's right. And in the meantime, drugs are being administered initially via an intravenous line, but then that line is lost. Is that right? She replies, that's right. Okay. She then says, so in the first instance, both Dr. Yuko and I attempted to recite an intravenous line, which is inserting a cannula. I do not recall how many attempts, but normally in a very sick baby or a child, we would not spend too long before moving to an intraosseous route. Keeping in mind then, when a baby collapses, circulation is very poor, and obtaining intravenous access can be very challenging. However, it is very important to have some kind of an access, and an alternative to intravenous access is intraosseous access. Bloody hell, this is a hard one, isn't it? We've heard that that's through the bone into the leg, into the bone marrow within. She replies, yes. That enables intravenous drugs. Intraosseous, yes. Sorry, intraosseous, as it then becomes. Can we return to your notes so you don't have to try and remember too much, because I think you've made a note to what unfolded with the intraosseous access. If we go down, please. You've then noted airway maintained with neopuff whilst bagging, whilst getting intubation ready. Few attempts at IV access unsuccessful. Dr. A arrived and took over airway from Dr. Yuko. Dr. Yuko and I inserted an intraosseous. Is that needle? She replies, that's right. First in left by Dr. Yuko. First in left, Dr. Yuko. Is that his action? Yes. And then the right by myself. Is that right? Yes. Heart rate falling. Then you put, adrenaline was given via intraosseous access. Is that right? She replies, that's right. Then intubated successfully at first attempt by Dr. A. She replies, that's right. So scroll down a little further, please. You've then put that Dr. A and I were present with child P through the day. For detailed notes on management and resuscitation, please refer to Dr. A's note entries. She replies, that's right. So that presumably is for times and quantities and the like. That's right. Okay. Whilst the drugs are being delivered via the intraosseous route, did resuscitation continue? She replies, yes. So again, I've not made detailed notes here, but with I think he had at least 4 collapses. He had 3 or 4 doses of adrenaline and a sodium chloride bolus before the return of spontaneous circulation. Well, again, if it assists you, it was not too long after 10 o'clock that Dr. A notes that child P stabilised. She replies, yes. Once that first collapse, or the emergency had passed of that first collapse, did you then go to contact somebody else? She replies, yes. So I've written here as well, after this happened, this was now beginning to really concern me, that it was very similar to what had happened the day before. We had stabilised child P, and I went away to speak to the neonatal transport team, consultant Dr. Rackham, who is the same, so it can be a different person, but it happened to be Dr. Rackham, who had been the same consultant that I'd spoken to the previous day for child O. Mr. Asprey, was intravenous access, child P now, the emergency having passed for now, was intravenous access regained? Intravenous access regained. She replies, yes. So again, there is a detailed note of that in my notes. I'll just clarify here. Basically, very shortly after child P's passing, Dr. A and I sat down and discussed a chronology of events, and what happened, and just to make some sense of what had happened. And I wrote my statement with times and what actually had happened in my statement very shortly after. So in that, I've made a note that once child P was stable, Dr. A managed to cite an IV access. I think one was on the right side and a short while later on the left. So not long after the first resuscitation. He had one intravenous access, and then after that 2 intravenous accesses plus an intraosseous access. When babies or even older children are unwell, it is recommended that they have at least 2 intravenous accesses. 1, because multiple medication can be needed, and 2, you have to back up in case one stops working. Mr. Asprey. Okay, shall we return to your note then, if we may? I think you've made a note that you spoke to Dr. Rackham at about 10:30 and updated him about child P. You were advised that you would inquire whether a bed was available and also try to take child R to the same unit was the plan. That was the parents' request, so that they could be together. Is that right? She replies, yes. Let me just read that again. Shall we return to your note then, please? Shall we return to your note then, if we may? I think you've made a note that you spoke to Dr. Rackham at about 10:30 and updated him about child P. You were advised that they would inquire whether a bed was available and try to take child R to the same unit was the plan. That was the parents' request, so they could be together. Is that right? Yes, that's right. You then go on to talk about speaking to Dr. Rackham at 1 p.m. But picking up about what you were saying about the times and sitting down with Dr. A, Dr. A has recorded another desaturation and bradycardia at 11:30 involving child P. She replies, that's right. And a serious one, is that right? That's right. Do you have a recollection of that second collapse? She replies, yes, I do. The second collapse, again, the oxygen saturation dropped and the heart rate dropped, and he needed full resuscitation with adrenaline, bicarbonate and sodium chloride boluses. Okay, we've heard are standard resuscitation drugs in these circumstances. She replies, that's right. And we've also had the explanation as to what each is designed to do. Having collapsed at 11:30, is it right that spontaneous circulation returned as soon as 11:36 with child P? She replies, yes, so I think, was this the time that he only needed one dose of adrenaline? Mr. Asprey, yes, I think. Yes, one of the things, which was, again, I don't have my statement in front of me, but I recall, was it at that time that it says he was very vigorous and breathing against a ventilator, so he was given some morphine, right? Which again is, so when you have a baby who is sick, who has sort of gone downhill and gradually becomes unwell to the point that you have intubated and ventilated them, they don't bounce back that quickly. In 5 minutes they'll be wanting to get this tube out. I don't want this anymore. So basically the baby complaining that they don't like the tube down their throats, which is why we've gone to then give him some morphine to sedate him. Mr. Asprey, okay, can we break that down? 11:30 collapse requiring, again, was there, she replies, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Thank you for saying that. To such an extent that he required the full resuscitation program, if we put it that way. Yes. Those drugs that you have told us about, the first dose is being administered. Yes. 6 minutes later, you have spontaneous circulation again. Yes. And how soon after is the baby effectively complaining about the intubation? She replies, about the same time. So what I've noted in my statement is that child P fighting the ventilator and breathing against the ventilator. When babies are being ventilated artificially with an endotracheal tube, let me just make sure I get this right. When babies are being ventilated artificially with an endotracheal tube and we are giving them artificial ventilation, it's not ideal that they should be breathing against the ventilator. So we then have to take measures to try to stop them breathing or synchronise with the ventilator somehow. Mr. Asprey, I think you were, I'm sorry for interrupting, tell us that it came as a surprise. You tell us that it came as a surprise that he displayed that behaviour. She replies, yes. So quickly afterwards. Absolutely, yes. Just explain to us why that was such a surprise, please. She replies, because basically, if a baby, the first collapse was unusual, there was no reason for him to have suddenly dropped his oxygen levels and his heart rate. There had been nothing to suggest that. We had taken the necessary measures and resuscitated him, and were still trying to work out what had actually happened, which was, when you're thinking, I don't get what is going on here, I need to discuss this with someone, and that someone at that moment in time is a tertiary specialist, which is why I'd then gone on to speak to Dr. Rackham. You're asking yourself, okay, I've done ABC, the baby is now stable, I don't understand what's going on. I need to speak to someone else and use their expertise, to include their advice in this. So that's all going on, and then while there's no reason again for him to collapse the second time, but it happens. And then he comes back very quickly. And not only does he start breathing again, he's very vigorous. He's breathing against, he's kicking against, and he's complaining, which means that whatever event happened was a short period, and then circulation was back, and he was, Mr. Asprey, it's a very rapid recovery from a very low point. She replies, yes. How did child P appear in that period when he was resisting the ventilator? She replies, so he was, what babies then do is you see them moving their arms and legs and they're trying to breathe and gag, and they open their mouths and you can see that they are appearing distressed from the intervention. That, Mr. Asprey, how would you have described, it's a snapshot I suppose, but how would you have described generally child P's condition at that moment in time? She replies, at that moment in time I would have thought, well, okay, he's come back quite quickly. And I think one of the things is what you do is very mechanical in that time. You deal with each situation as it's happening. And you're trying to count, because the only thing in your mind at that point is, how do I make this baby better? What do I do? And what do I have to do? So when a baby collapses, you give them adrenaline. You do CPR. You do the intubation. You've done that. Then if it happens again, you do the same thing again. So you're countering or trying to deal with every problem as it happens. So at this point in time, I see a baby who's come back very quickly, who's vigorous, but he's not. I'm not in a place to say, well, okay, you're vigorous, you don't like your tube, I'm going to take the tube out. I can't do that. I have to leave that tube in because this baby is having these collapses that I don't understand. So then I have to find a way to try and sedate him so he doesn't fight the ventilator. Mr. Asprey, okay, I think the medication that was given to child P at that stage was pancuronium. Is that right? She replies, did he not have morphine before that? Because I think at one point he had 100 micrograms per kilogram of morphine first, and then he had the pancuronium. Mr. Asprey, did that have the desired effect? Right, we'll stop there for a second and just have a little breather. Lucy Blue with the £4.99 super sticker. Thank you so very much. Well, getting through it actually a little bit quicker than anticipated. We've done 45 slides so far, so that's very good. Right, I'm just going to catch up with the chat, so give me a few seconds. Actually, I think if we stick with this, I might be able to get this all done this evening. I'm just thinking about it. I've done 45, and I've got to get up to 92. So I've basically got to do double what I've already done. So I will try my best to get this all done this evening. So let me just get off here a second. But in the meantime, I'm actually going to quickly make a green tea. So stick with me whilst I replenish my supplies. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Right, I'm back. Now, what is this skullduggery that I see before me? What is this absolute skullduggery? Mr. Lenny Russell with the 10 gifted crime scene to courtroom memberships.
Oh my God!
Thank you so much for that, Lenny. That is far, far, far too generous. Let me just see if I can tell who they've gone to. Bear with me, because I can't actually tell on my stream overlay, but I might be able to tell if I look at the actual YouTube video. So give me a second. Thanks again, Fat Lenny. That's as I say, you've gifted so many memberships this month. What can I say? It's incredibly helpful. As I say, tomorrow we've got the members only stream tomorrow, which will take place probably about 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, and we'll be going through Erian Powell's evidence at the Thirlwell inquiry. So we do one private live stream for members per week, and it usually takes place either on a Saturday or a Sunday evening. So tomorrow's live stream will be at 6 p.m, and that is, as I say, a members only stream. But let me just see who they've gone to, if I can. Can I or can't I? That's the question. My chat seems to be right behind for some reason. Oh, there we are. Right. So, right. Stop there. TH was gifted a membership. Elspeth Hughes, the legend, was gifted a membership. Jackie Brand was gifted a membership. Ducks Are Watching You has been gifted a membership. Dupsy Daisy was gifted a membership. Anne was gifted a membership. Wild Scott Aurora, Saucy, was gifted a membership. Stevie. Who else? Linda Vernon. Who else is there? The only annoying thing about the memberships is that you can't choose who gets them. And so many people have said, oh, I'm desperate for a membership. Even myself, I can gift 10 per month to my viewers, but I can't choose who receives them. If I could, I would, but I can't, sadly. It's just out of my control, I'm afraid. Let's have a look here. Sit and Spin. I can't believe, I mean, has Leslie got the right... Has Leslie got it selected? Have you got it selected on your YouTube account that you can accept memberships, Leslie? Because it's becoming, you know, like you say, a bit of a running joke now. I reckon Leslie has actually got a membership, but she's just not telling us. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, I can't believe Leslie's here all the time, and she hasn't been gifted a membership, which I find astounding. They're crazy. But anyway, thank you so much for that, Lenny. That's incredibly generous of you, yet again. And tomorrow will be the private... I keep saying private. Tomorrow will be the members-only stream. That's what I'm supposed to say. Not like it's some sort of secret club or something. Just a private members-only stream, basically. So, yeah. I still can't believe Leslie hasn't got one. It's probably something I'm not doing. Someone told me that you've got to go onto your YouTube account and click something that says that you accept memberships or something. Lenny, can you help her out with it? I don't know exactly what you have to click, but I'm sure you've been through this with Leslie already, to be perfectly honest. Let's have a look here. Someone had a decent question, but there we go. Why are some people's names in grey while most are in green? The ones in green are members, aren't they? I think the blue ones are moderators. People who are green are members. And the grey ones are the people who haven't yet been gifted a membership. or who haven't purchased one, basically. Oh, dear. Funny. Right, okay. Yeah, I think that's what it is, though. I think it's just membership levels. And those who aren't members, basically. Right, anyway, let's make a bit more progress. I can't promise that we're going to get this finished tonight, but I'll try my utmost. We'll see how we get on. Right, okay, so we had Dr. B, who said... Oh, actually, let's put the banner back up. Hang on a second. Nearly forgot, didn't I? Did I even have one? No, I didn't. Oh my God. Right, just bear with me a second. Let's edit this one. So, Dr. B, evidence in court in relation to child P. To child P, right, okay. Hang on a minute, let's just change this. Hang on. Transcripts. Dr. B evidence. In court. Dr. B evidence in court in relation to child P. Right, okay. In court. Yeah, that's fine. Right, okay. David Zimmerman has gifted a membership, but who's got the membership? That's the question. Bexminster. Another child. It's almost like gambling, isn't it? This is. Keep buying the memberships until Leslie gets one. Oh my God. Oh, Lucy. I mean, how can I possibly turn down such a request? Where was that message I just saw? Thanks again for that, David. Much appreciated. Where's the message? John, can I have the sound effect, please, for my birthday? Well, just before we continue with the transcripts. Absolutely.
Oh my God!
There we go. Right, now back to the serious business of the court transcripts. Okay. Right, so, Dr. B. Did he not have morphine before that? Because I think at one point he had 100 micrograms per kilogram of morphine first, and then he had the pancuronium. Did that have the desired effect? Asks Mr. Astbury. She replies, yes, with the pancuronium. What the pancuronium does is it just stops them moving. It paralyses you. Basically, it's a drug that paralyses you. That means that you can control the baby's breathing completely. They do not move, you breathe for them. You basically have to make sure that the ventilation settings are optimal, and you can anticipate that the baby is not putting in any effort. But that also means that you have control over their breathing, and by ventilation you can't cause them any harm. Okay, Mr. Astbury, right. What I would like you to look at next, please, if we can go to tile 178. You comment on a blood gas record that was taken not too long after this episode at 12:08. She replies, yes. If we can scroll down, please, I'm going to ask you to look at the penultimate entry on that particular line. She replies, the 1203 gas. This, I remember being very pleased with this gas when I saw it, because this had come after a few very poor gases. There's one that's not here, which was a 6 point something as well, which is in my statement, and it's in another gas record, but that's not been entered here. So the 1203 gas, the pH of 7.32, which is very good. A CO2 of 3.33, which is low normal, which means we are ventilating him well. A PO2 of 5.72 is the capillary gas. That doesn't worry me. Base excess is minus 11.4, which is quite high, and this was a problem that we, as you can see from the previous gases as well, that's been progressively rising. So this is metabolic acidosis, which means that the tissues are being deprived of oxygen. And that is producing the lactate, which, despite us having given him quite a few doses of bicarbonate, and he went onto a bicarbonate infusion as well later on. That is minus 11.4, but to me, that was... I remember him breathing a sigh of... No, sorry. I remember breathing a sigh of relief. Phew. Because by this time, I'd spoken to Dr. Rackham a few times. They were on their way, and I was thinking, okay, we've paralysed him. We've got control of his ventilation. We've done a gas. The gas is good. So yes, we are dealing with the metabolic acidosis. And fine, the transport team are going to be here soon. We're going to be okay. I just remember that sort of sigh of relief at that point. Mr. Astbury, bearing in mind in his recent intubation, what does that gas, if anything, tell you about the effectiveness or otherwise of his ventilation? She replies, that is effective, that his ventilation is working. So he's been paralysed now. We have sort of dealt with the fact that he was fighting the ventilator. We don't know why it's happened still. We are just, as I said, trying to deal with the problems as we are facing them. Not quite understanding why these collapses have happened. But where we are from his airway breathing point of view, I'm reasonably satisfied. Circulation, I'm not very happy with the base excess of minus 11.4, but I feel like we're getting there. Well, hang on a minute, let's bloody start this again. It's difficult when it's so bloody disjointed. That is effective, that his ventilation is working. He's been paralysed now. We have sort of dealt with the fact that he was fighting the ventilator. We don't know why it's happened still. We are just, as I said, trying to deal with the problems as we are facing them. Not quite understanding why these collapses have happened. But where we are from his airway breathing point of view, I am reasonably satisfied. Circulation, I'm not very happy with the base excess of minus 11.4, but I feel like we're getting there. Things are getting better and under control. Had you carried out any cold light tests during the course of the 2 resuscitations? She replies, yes, we had. The cold light had an indicator that might be a pneumothorax or an air leak. But I think that changed with an X-ray taken at 11:57. Is that right? She replies, that's right, yes. So again, let's just read that part again. Yes, we had. And the cold light hadn't indicated there might be a pneumothorax or an air leak. Then Mr. Asprey, I think that changed with an X-ray taken at 11:57. Is that right? She replies, that's right, yes. Go to tile 400, please. We can see there the time and date on the X-ray. I suspect the clue is in the question. What can you see there on that particular X-ray? She replies, particularly in that chest X-ray, we can see a right-sided pneumothorax, but it's not a tension pneumothorax. So the baby is intubated. I can see an endotracheal tube. I can see that there is a rim of air on the right side. You can see the lung margins, and you can see the air. He replies, Mr. Asprey, thank you. And then the doctor says, however, so pneumothorax is an air leak. Sometimes in babies who are otherwise not well, we can see small air leaks. But a tension pneumothorax is when you get a large amount of air on one side and it pushes the heart to the other side. That is an acute emergency that you have to do something about. Mr. Asprey, is that the case here? She replies, no. So this was not a tension pneumothorax. There was no, what the hell is that? Mediastinal shift? Mediastinal shift? Which is why at the time, given with what had happened, we decided not to do anything. There was no mediastinal shift. There was an air leak, but that changed with the next collapse because when we move on, when he deteriorated again, one of the first things we thought about was, well, yes, it wasn't a tension pneumothorax then, but has it become one now? We needed to deal with that, so we then went on to do a needle aspiration to relieve that. Mr. Asprey. In Dr. A's note, that third deterioration took place at 12:28. She replies, that's right. Again, in the timeline, does that accord with your recollection? She replies, yes, it does. I do remember exactly what had happened at that time as well. So with that gas that we looked at, we were sort of, Dr. A and I think, both breathed a sigh of relief. We were in nursery 2. It's an L-shaped corridor. Dr. A and I walked down to the kitchen. There's a little kitchen just as you enter the neonatal unit to make a drink. And I remember putting the kettle on, and Dr. A and I were talking through, when you were just trying to get your head around what's actually happened, talking out loud, thinking out loud. I don't think we got very far, so literally, I don't think the kettle had even boiled, where somebody shouted from the end of the corridor, can you come please? Can you please come now? So both of us were out of the room when that collapse happened. Mr. Asprey. Was there anyone left in the room when you went out? She replies, yes, as far as I can remember, staff nurse Lucy Letby was there with him at all of the time. Right, hang on a minute. Let's just go back and do this part again. And I remember putting the kettle on, and Dr. A and I were talking through, when you were just trying to get your head around what's actually happened, talking out loud, thinking out loud, I don't think we got very far. So literally, I don't think the kettle had even boiled, where somebody shouted from the end of the corridor, can you please come now? So both of us were out of the room when that collapse happened. Was there anyone left in the room when you went out? She replies, yes. As far as I can remember, staff nurse Lucy Letby was there with him all of the time. Anyone else there when you left? She replies, I don't remember. Do you remember who called you back? She replies, no, I don't even know if I saw the person because I think we were in the kitchen and somebody just shouted because it was literally shouting distance. So they would have to have gone to the end of the corridor and shouted us because they knew we were there and we just came running back. When you came running back, what did you find? She replies, so as far as I can remember, he was desaturating and his heart rate was dropping and his oxygen levels were dropping as well. And it looked like this child who had been paralysed with pancuronium had dislodged his ET tube. And one of the problems with pancuronium is whilst it's very good in controlling the ventilation, the baby can't do anything for themselves. So if the tube becomes dislodged for any reason, and it is unlikely, unless because the baby is not moving, they are not breathing, so unless something really untoward happens, you wouldn't expect that tube to dislodge. Which was why I think we had sort of walked away from it thinking, well, you know, he's now going to breathe or fight the ventilator. We have a few minutes to think about, is there anything else we are missing? Or, you know, what we need to think about. So we came back to find him crashing. That's the term you would use. And when we checked the tube, had dislodged. Do you happen to recall who was in the room when you went back? She says, I don't have a vivid memory, but I do remember Lucy was at the bedside of the baby. She would have obviously asked somebody to call us. Okay. Were you given any explanation as to what had happened when you got back? She replies, to be honest with you, I don't remember asking for one. That wasn't my priority at the time. What was it that caused you to believe that the problem was the tube? She replies, so the baby's connected to the ventilator. You are giving them breathing support through the ventilator. If their oxygen levels start to drop, then the first thing you think about is the ventilator and the tube doing what they're meant to be doing? Because in a paralysed baby, it's the tube and the ventilator doing everything. The baby can't do anything. So you're basically literally one of the first things you think about, and if you're not supplied with oxygen through the ventilator for long enough, it's only a matter of time before your heart gets deprived of oxygen as well and starts dropping as well. So the first thing you go to in a baby who's paralysed and starts to drop their saturations is there a problem with the tube? Mr. Asprey, okay, did you examine the tube? She replies, I must have had a listen, tried to bag and checked if either there, there was no air entry or the chest wasn't inflating. But that decision was probably made quite quickly, that the tube wasn't in anymore. Yes, I think I've written the capnograph wasn't changing colour. That's one way of finding out. Mr. Asprey, what happened then to the tube? She replies, we removed that tube and Dr. A reintubated him. For a third time, was cardiopulmonary resuscitation recommenced? She replies, yes. Mr. Asprey, what happened this time? Can you recall? She replies, this time as well, he received multiple doses of adrenaline, sodium chloride, sodium bicarbonate. We also commenced him on adrenaline infusion. I think this was around this time, 12:20, was around the time to give him a constant supply of either at this time or maybe a little bit later on, he went on 2 more infusions of dopamine and dobutamine to again improve his circulation and his cardiac contractility. No, I did it right the first time. Contractility. Something like that. Okay, were any measures taken regarding, at this stage, the pneumothorax that you'd seen about? She replies, yes, again, with the... You'll have to go back to the statement to consult with the time. So one of the first things we then also thought about with this collapse, once the ventilation had happened, was to needle the pneumothorax, the right side. The needle of the pneumothorax is that you insert a cannula and allow the air to come out. So that's an emergency procedure, which always should be followed by inserting a chest drain. However, a chest drain insertion is an aseptic, and a fairly sort of lengthy procedure. It's not in an emergency, it's a procedure we call needophorecentesis. So you put a needle in and you allow the air to escape. So if there is a tension pneumothorax that's causing a massive compromise, it will release the air and allow the lung to expand. And then you go back and insert a chest drain properly, which is what was done. Mr. Asprey. In the context of what was happening around this time, we've mentioned 1228. Do you remember at what stage that needle was introduced to, as it were, first aid the pneumothorax? She says, or would you be reliant on Dr. A's note for that? She replies, I would be reliant on my statement and his notes because we both did them in conjunction at the time when this was happening. Everything was happening in quick succession. So thinking, who inserted the needle? She replies, Dr. A. So basically the first thing to do would have been to secure the airway. Needle thoracentesis wouldn't have been a primary procedure. So you intubate the baby again, a baby who's paralysed is not breathing. You tube them again, and then the first thing you do is a needle thoracentesis to release the air, and then you go from there. Mr. Asprey. I'm going to ask Mr. Murphy, please, to go, I hope I'm right, to tile 435, please. This is Dr. A's notes on this point. I'm going to ask you to have a look at this, please. You can see at the top reference to the reintubation that you told us about. She replies, yes. It's just that second paragraph down, please, beginning chest x-ray. Yes. Does that suggest a chest x-ray was taken? Is that at around 12:30? That's right. Do you recall that taking place? She replies, yes, that would have all been happening at that time, yes. I'm sorry, it's not your writing, but are you able to read what? She replies, yes. Is that right-sided lateral? Right-sided lateral pneumothorax decompressed with 24 gauge Gelco at second to third intercostal space, mid-clavicular line at 1240. I think it says 2 to 3, but you might have to ask. Mr. Asprey. Just dealing then with that paragraph, Doctor. We've looked at the x-ray that was taken at 11:57. You tell us what you recall that chest x-ray. You tell us that you recall that chest x-ray being taken around 12:30. She replies, no, I don't. The timeline, I'm not going to be precise about. No, I don't. The timeline, I'm not going to be precise about. The timeline of the x-ray machine is the most accurate one because it records the time when the chest x-ray is taken. Yes? Mr. Asprey, or should do. Which it should do, yes. Whatever time we have here, I have, or Dr. A has approximate times because there are... I find it difficult to get through this, to be honest. Oh my god, yeah, I think we're going to have to... I think we'll stop here because I've still got 32 pages. 32 pages left to go. And I think I'll probably smash my head against the monitor. So, right, yeah. Let's just have a little break for a second and then I'll try and continue. That's the problem when you're reading something for the first time. It's not particularly fluid, is it? Do you know what I mean? Especially when things are spaced out in a very weird way, like this one is. But let's have a little break for a couple of minutes and then we'll try again. And if it's still terrible, then we will leave this until Monday, but we'll see how we go. Well, I've only done about an hour and 55, and I was hoping to do about 2.5 hours tonight, so let's just have a little break for a second. And then we'll try again. No, so it just doesn't help the way it's all spaced out. And like I say, I don't read these before I'm narrating them to you. It's like literally, okay, have I got enough time to get this done? Yes, space it out, color coordinate the answer or whatever, and then literally upload it. I've got no time to go through the 90 pages to read what it actually says. So yeah, it's just, I find it so much easier reading his parts, but she's always like, all the bloody time, it doesn't flow particularly easily, does it? I totally forgot to message her, to be honest. I will send her a message probably tomorrow morning now, but I'll keep you updated about that. I'll definitely keep you updated. Let's have a look here. Yeah, don't worry, Silver Fox. We're going to give it a minute or so, and then we'll have another attempt It's just you get sort of a bit, blinded by all the words at certain points, and it just sort of all merges into one, and you're not able to sort of articulate certain parts properly, which is, a little bit annoying. Let's just see where we got up to though. 625. The timeline. We did that bit. To the bottom of the page, certainly onto the next page. You'd spoken to Dr. Ray. I think we got to here, didn't we? 63, is it? Yeah, we'll start from there again in a minute. Right. Elspeth Hughes with the £3 super sticker. Thank you so much for your support. Greatly appreciated as always. And like I say, we're not finishing yet, but tomorrow will be the members only stream, which will take place at 6 p.m. But you'll see a video. You'll see a video put out about that probably tomorrow morning, advertising it. Those of you who are members, and that will be taking place at 6 p.m. Luna is snoring. I don't think she is. She is beneath me, cuddling her paws. You know when dogs sort of like cuddle their own paws. It's so cute, isn't it? She just, sort of cuddled up below me. Right, okay. Let's have another crack of the old whip, shall we? See how we get on. Right, let's hide that there. Right, okay. Let's have a sip of the old green tea and try again. Right. Okay, so I have, or Dr. A has, approximate times because we've gone back and thought about, okay, we would have done this around this time. Okay, well, I'm going to go back to your note now, please, at 6:25. We can scroll to the point that we'd reached in your note. We had got, I think, to the bottom of the page, certainly onto the next page. You'd spoken to Dr. Rackham, you told us, around 10:30, but on a number of occasions, is that right? She replies, yes, I did. I haven't documented them all, but I spoke to him a few times. Do you recall the resolution of the resuscitation that began at around 12:28 that we've been discussing? She replies, do I recall the resolution as in the return of spontaneous circulation? Mr. Asprey says, yes. She replies, yes. Okay, how long from recollection do you recall that taking? She replies, I think it lasted several minutes, and he probably needed a good few doses of adrenaline from what I can remember. So that's a third resuscitation during the course of about 4 hours? She replies, yes. Okay. Moving on then in the timeline, if we may, and returning to your note. Spoke to Dr. Rackham. Is that about 1 p.m? She replies, yes. Updated about frequent collapses with DSATs and BRADIes on ventilation and possibly pulmonary hypertensive episodes. Is that right? She replies, that's right, yes. Just explain to us a pulmonary hypertensive episode, please. She replies, I was discussing with Dr. Rackham. Here we go again. So when I spoke to him at 1, this would have been, did you say the 4th or the 3rd? Mr. Asprey, the 3rd was at 12:28. She then says, yes, he must have recovered from this, and by this time I was obviously becoming extremely worried and again revisiting, are we missing something here? Is there something else we can do? And I spoke to Dr. Rackham again. Pulmonary hypertension is a condition which babies can develop, in which you can intermittently have periods where lung pressures go very high and oxygenation is compromised. So we are thinking here of every box that we can that might explain why these collapses are happening. And one of the possibilities Dr. Rackham suggested was, is he going into pulmonary hypertensive crisis? Was one differential? And he suggested to try and get an echocardiogram to see if that's the case. Right, Mr. Asprey. Okay, that will be the way with it to determine whether that was the problem or not. She replies, yes. Did you succeed in getting an echocardiogram? She replies, yes, I spoke to Dr. Breary. He is one of our colleagues who has a specialist interest in cardiology and to come and do an echocardiogram. Dr. Breary did and excluded pulmonary hypertension, and basically I think I've written he had mild trisopid regurgitation, which is nothing to be concerned about. Trisopid or, yeah, Yeah, I think that's right. Mr. Asprey. All right, let's pause there. You're quite right to say the rest of your oh god, here we go again. All right, let's pause there. You're quite right to say that's the rest of your note, and I just wanted to deal with that first. You've then put already on dopamine and adrenaline infusions. She says, sorry, where are we now? Mr. Asprey, after you said, then she says, yes, already on dopamine and adrenaline infusions. Mr. Asprey, due to frequent deterioration. Is that dobutamine? She replies, yes, dobutamine prepared. So all these drugs augment each other and do slightly different things. So dopamine is good for children who have poor peripheral circulation. He had already been on that. Adrenaline, because it improves cardiac contractility and again maintains blood pressure and improves perfusion. So he was already on that. And then again, he obviously went on and had another collapse despite being on this. So one of the things Dr. Rackham suggested was to add in dobutamine, which again has a special effect in improving heart contractility. Oh, bloody hell, I think that's how you say it. Hang on a minute, this is doing my head in. Let me just have a little Google of that word a second, and just make sure I'm not completely butchering it. All right. Yeah, I was basically right. Okay, contractility. And again, maintains blood pressure and improves perfusion. Right, we've done that. Okay, he's obviously went on and had another collapse despite being on this. So one of the things Dr. Rackham suggested was to add in dobutamine, which again has a special effect in improving heart contractility. Because we were having frequent episodes of his heart rate going down as well. So he had start him on dobutamine as well and get an echo done to see what is going on. Mr. Asprey, and you put here, Dr. Brewery performed an echo and that's mild trisupid regurgitation. She replies, yes. Anything to worry about with that? She replies, no. And good cardiac contractility. Is that it? She replies, yes, the heart. He could see that the heart was contracting well. So obviously at the time when Dr. Brewery did the echo, his heart rate was good. And from what he could see, there was no reason for a pulmonary hypertensive crisis to be causing this problem. You have then put, is that continue on dobutamine? She replies, yes. HCO3, that's bicarbonate, is it? She replies, yes. Infusion. She then says, commenced over 6 hours, full correction as per advice from Dr. Rackham. So looking at his blood gas pattern, one of the things that we could see was that we gave him multiple doses of. So normally there is a formula we calculate of how much bicarbonate a baby needs. So when you get the full dose, you halve it and give it over half an hour and that's it. You halve it and give it over half an hour and that's it. So he'd had quite a few doses of that. He was collapsing repeatedly, and every time we did a gas, the acidosis was worse. So it wasn't something we were getting on top of. Persistent acidosis is not good for the heart because it has a negative effect on cardiac contractility. So we were trying to counter all these things, and when I would have been speaking to Dr. Rackham, I would have been giving him the gases, the metabolic acidosis worsening. So another thing that he suggested was put him up on a continuous infusion of full correction over 6 hours, which is what he is on now, Mr. Asprey. And that's to correct that acidosis that was proving tough to shift. Is that right? She replies, yes. All right, let's go in your note, please. She then says, sorry, say that. And then Mr. Asprey, if we can go on with the note, please, Mr. Murphy. Just going to scroll down for us again in a moment. Thank you. Your next note is about Dr. Rackham, but between that phone call and 3 o'clock, I'd just like to discuss that period with you, please. She replies, yes. After those measures suggested by Dr. Rackham, how was child P up until about 3 o'clock? She replies, so between this time, I think there was one gas at least. So he was relatively... I think we also gave him, in this time, some metronidazole to cover for necrotizing enterocolitis. Dr. Rackham also asked to give him a start dose of hydrocortisone, just in case there might be an element of what we call adrenal crisis. So we took a cortisol level and gave him that. And again, these are all differentials going through everybody's mind. So very sick babies, the adrenal gland produces a very important hormone, cortisol, which helps us fight stress and sickness. If a baby is not producing that in the right amount, then that can be the cause of the collapse. So we did that blood level and gave him some, excuse me, hydrocortisone. We also gave him some metronidazole. Both of these were given through the intraosseous route. He had a gas, I'll have to ask you to check the time, of 7:25. No, sorry, I'll have to ask you to check the time of 7:25, which is not great, but still, just pause there. We'll put it up for you if that helps. Everyone will have seen it. It's the last one on the sheet. It's the last one on the sheet, sadly. It's at 13:38. She replies, yes. It's the last venous sample entered on the record. That's the one you were trying to remember. She replies, yes. This is a pH of 7.25, which is borderline, normal, okay, acceptable. His carbon dioxide levels are fine, which means that his ventilation is not an issue. His oxygen PO2 is fine, but his acidosis is worse. So his base excess is minus 13.8 and his lactate is 18.5, which is extremely high and worrying. So this is all metabolic now. Breathing wise, we've got control. It's just his circulation is that poor. Oh, hang on a minute. It's just that his circulation is that poor and there is that much acidosis around that. It's causing his body to produce a large amount of lactate and his acidosis. Mr. Asprey, you mentioned a number of things. Is it also right that child P received a dose of Curasurf, surfactant? She replies, yes, during the course of the afternoon as well. Yes, yes. And do you recall Dr. A, once it was considered appropriate? You told us you couldn't do it in an unstable baby. But there did come a point when Dr. A felt able to do something with that temporary needle that you told us about to drain the pneumothorax. She replies, yes, so between the time of after the collapse at 12:30 and reintubation. In the period of stabilisation that followed, Dr. A successfully sighted a chest drain and there was an x-ray confirming that pneumothorax has resolved. Okay, Dr. A's note was that at 3 o'clock, hang on a second, Dr. A's note was at 3 o'clock. Does that accord with your recollection as best you can remember? She replies, I don't recollect the exact times, but Mr. Asprey, let's have a look at, I would like you to look at 2 x-rays, please. If we first go to tile 434, if we actually look at the x-ray, please, unfortunately not timed or dated, this one, doctor, hence my reservation earlier. Yes, but we saw Dr. A's note. This is before the drain was fitted. She replies, the drain is in situ now, so this tube that's coming in, indicating, is the drain that you can see that the pneumothorax has resolved. The endotracheal tube is in, and the lungs are inflated. Mr. Asprey, okay, I'd like you to look at another x-ray, please, which is tile 574, which is timed. She replies, yes, that's a pigtail. Just comparing the two, I'm not going to go back to it, the difference there is the pigtail, is it? She replies, yes. So that's the one that takes longer to insert. And you need a field of aseptic area. You need a field of aseptic area and it takes a good half hour to insert. So this would have happened, right, let's read that again. Yes, so that's the one that takes longer to insert. And you need a field of aseptic area and it takes a good half an hour to insert. So this would have happened, and then Mr. Asprey, that's 3:36 and would be consistent with Dr. A's note that it was put in at or around 3 o'clock. She replies, around that time, yes. All right, with apologies to Mr. Murphy for skipping around, can we go back to 625, please? Want to pick your note up at 3 o'clock, please, which I think is on the 3rd page, if I remember rightly. Dr. Rackham arrived with, is that transport nurse in effect? She replies, staff nurse, SN is staff nurse. With transfer team at 3 p.m. as chest drain was being inserted and fixed. So again, consistent with Dr. A's note, and then sadly, shortly thereafter, child P deteriorated again. She replies, yes. Do you recall where you were when that happened? She replies, I was in that room speaking to Dr. Rackham, I'd spoken to him on a good few occasions during the day, and I remember he was just standing opposite me, and there were quite a lot of people in the room, but I don't recall who else was there. I was speaking to him and giving him handover on events through the day. Okay. And child P started to deteriorate again. Oxygen levels dropping, heart rate dropping, and full cardiac resuscitation was started again. Mr. Asprey, hope this doesn't sound a daft question. I appreciate you were in the room. But how were you alerted to child P's sudden deterioration? She replies, it would have been either the alarms going off or because we were in the room. So it would have been pretty much in front of us. Right, okay, you mentioned that the resuscitation procedure began again. Yes. This time we've heard it went on for some considerable time. She replies, yes. But sadly on this occasion it was not successful. No. We heard this morning that having arrived during the course of this, Dr. Rackham took control of the situation. Is that your recollection? She replies, yes. And beyond assisting him, did you have any other interaction with child P? She replies, no. I think one of the things he added was we doubled the dose of adrenaline. So he had, instead of 0.1 mil per kilogram, 0.2 mil per kilogram. Another thing Dr. Rackham added was, is there a possibility that he could be having seizures? So let's give him a loading dose of phenobarbital. So we gave him that. Phenobarbital. Another thing, because of the persistent bradycardia, adrenaline wasn't touching him. His adrenaline infusion had been doubled. Just 1 second. Yes, atropine is another drug that we don't use very commonly for resuscitations, but he just said to give him a dose of that. So we tried that as well, but it didn't do anything. It wasn't successful, no. All right, okay. Before we move on to the remainder of your note, can I ask you this? You told us, you've given us an idea of who was there throughout the afternoon and at particular times. Any conversations with any of those people that stick in your mind? She replies, so one conversation that sticks in my mind is that when was it? Just after the 12 o'clock gas? The 7.321? So he had just had that gas. So we had that gas, and after that, let's bloody start again. So disjointed. So one conversation that sticks in my mind is, that, when was it? Just after the 12 o'clock gas, the 7.321. So we had that gas, and after that, so how we have the old neonatal unit, this was nursery 2. And then there's nursery 1, which is a bigger room. So I remember going there to nursery 1. And there were a few nurses present there, including staff nurse Lucy Letby. And I remember, so when you face one wall, bloody hell, it's every bloody sentence, isn't it? And I remember, so when you face one wall, there's a clock in front, and I remember looking at the clock, and it was going just past 12. And I just said, oh, the transport team are going to be here soon, almost thinking out loud more than anything else. And I'm literally sort of counting the minutes before they arrive. Just desperately wanting this baby to get better and thinking, there's something, you're just totally out of your depth and can't think what's going on. Maybe somebody else can come and help. And staff nurse Letby says, he's not leaving here alive, is he? Which I found absolutely shocking at the time. And I just turned around and said, don't say that, he's had a good gas. And I just remember that's just all these years on. 7 years on? 6 years on? That moment is still very much alive in my mind. And I said this, and I left the room. But found that because, yes, we have babies all through our careers. We see babies who are very sick, who are very, very unwell. And with some of them, who have followed a course and have become progressively unwell, even when we know that their chances of survival are very poor. Personally, for me, that's something I would never let myself think. Because it's that hope that makes you keep trying. So I just found that very, very, I don't even know if I was upset. I think I was just shocked at the time. I was just shocked. Okay, just pausing there. Do you remember the time roughly? She said it was just between 12 and quarter past because he had just had this gas. I'd had the gas and I'd come out of that room and gone to another room. This is the gas that you have described as being, she replies, the 7.35 or 7.321. The one that you were pleased with, she replies, yes. So how would you describe child P, albeit relative, to what had been going on? But how was he at that moment? How was he at the moment that conversation took place? She replies, at that point in time, since that morning, he was the best At that point in time, since that morning, he was the best you could call him. We'd managed... This was a kid that had had a good gas. He was ventilated. He was stable. The transport team were on their way, so I thought we were winning, and found no reason for this comment, really. Okay. Through the course of the afternoon, any other conversations with anybody that stick in your mind? She replies, so after child P passed away, so we've gone through, when you go through to the labour ward, which is literally a connecting door from the neonatal unit, Lavender Suite, where the parents were. So myself and staff nurse Letby went down there and I went to speak to the parents. And I remember feeling, when you just feel, I don't know how to face them. I don't know how to say this. So I went there and the parents were sitting there and I told them that child P2 was going to need a post-mortem. Staff nurse Letby was behind me against a door, against a shelf, and again, one of the things that I found unusual was she was almost sort of very animated in that she was saying to the parents, do you want me to make a memory box? A memory box for him, like I did for Child O yesterday. And I just remember thinking, this is not a new baby, this is a dead baby. Why are you so excited about this? Mr. Asprey, why do you use the word excited? Because that's how she was. She was just, do you want me to make a memory box? Like you make, babies upstairs get these. What do you call them? Bounty packs or whatever. Newborns, they get this from the hospital or someone where they have different little things. And the parents were like, yes, please, that would be nice, thank you. And I found that very inappropriate, the way it was said. Not what was said. She replies, no, not what was said. There was nothing wrong with the content of it. It was just how it was said. Okay, so dealing with the period after child P had passed away. Can we just conclude your note, please? If we can turn back to that, please. You've reiterated, for detailed notes on resus, please refer to Dr. A's notes. At around 4:30, is that, spoke to Chris at the coroner's office. She says, And then the senior coroner's office, Christine Hurst. Scroll down, please, Mr. Murphy. Thank you. You have noted that it was agreed that both triplets' deaths, and you have quoted, quote, unexplained and would require coroner's post-mortem. Is that right? She replies, that's right. You then put the contact details for Christine Hurst and also her home number, which has been obviously taken out, and that she could be contacted over the weekend if needed. Is that right? Yes. Then you have noted that Child R was transferred to Liverpool Women's Hospital. Anything you recall about that process of Child R being taken? She replies, yes, so I remember thinking at the time, I remember Dad was there and he was absolutely sobbing, stood next to child P, and literally begging Dr. Rackham, can you please take him? And even though I didn't beg, I said to Dr. Rackham in a more professional way, in my mind and heart, I just want him to leave because I thought that's the only way he's going to live. You thought that? She said, yes, I thought that. And Dr. Rackham agreed to take child R. She replies, yes, he was very good about that, yes. And then you put that you spoke to them, the parents, about the post-mortem. Sadly, a conversation that you had already had on the 23rd of June after child O's death. She replies, yes. And they wished for child O and child P to be transferred to the mortuary for the weekend. I informed them, as per discussion with the coroner's office, that both triplets would be transferred to, is that Arrow Park? She says Alderhay on Monday, when various specimens for testing for infection, genetic and metabolic conditions would be taken, and they would be returned to the parents by the end of the week for the funeral arrangements. And you then carry on with the arrangements for more time with child O and P if they wished. perhaps we don't need to. If we scroll down a bit more, you gave Dad your secretary's number so you could be contacted if necessary, and also for the parents to call if they had any questions, and you arranged to meet them. That, I think, concludes your note with your signature, Doctor. Is that right? She replies, yes. Mr. Asprey, thank you. I have no further questions, but I don't know whether that's Mr. Goss, the judge. Yes, we'll have a break. Can we start again at 22? So in about 8 minutes, that will be sufficient. I'm anxious that this witness completes her evidence this afternoon. Okay, that's the end of that. Right. Bloody hell, I can't believe we managed it. It's a miracle. 92 slides. Right, okay, let's get back to the chat. Very briefly. Alora Mack, did I even say thank you for this $9.99? I can't remember if I did or if I didn't. I cannot remember. But nevertheless, thank you very much. Oh, it's awful, isn't it? It's the triplets case is yeah, it's just one of the harder ones, isn't it? And as I say, tomorrow we'll be taking a look at, in the members only stream, we'll be taking a look at the evidence given by the then ward manager Arian Powell and her attendance at the Thirlwall inquiry. So we'll be doing that at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Right, I'm just going to stick with you for a few more minutes, just catch up with the chat. Just see if there's anything I've missed. Bear with me a second. Where were you when I needed you, Susie? The problem is I can't see the chat when I'm narrating it. I think I was right. Phenobarbital. Yeah, look at that. I'm like a professional. It's funny because there's quite a lot of words like needle phorecentesis and things like that I'm used to pronouncing because I've done it when I did the cross-examination or the closing speech, or I've looked at how it's pronounced, this, that and the other. But there's so many different words or different medications that I haven't seen when I take a look at these specific interviews or these specific, people appearing on the witness stand. There's loads and loads of different words or medications that I've never seen before mentioned in the cross-examination or anything that I've had to pronounce before. So they catch me completely and utterly off guard. So my sincere apologies if I pronounced anything incorrectly. Right, but at least I got that one right, so that's something, isn't it? That's something. Be grateful for small mercies. Bex Minster. Yes, you have a membership by all accounts, I think. And Leslie has locked her current, quote unquote, current husband in the cellar. That is quite worrying, Leslie. Don't make a habit of that, please. We can't be condoning such behaviour. Hardest thing for me was why, but her school friend's theory really made sense to me. How did you feel? I haven't spoken to her on the phone. I've only spoken to her via WhatsApp messages. Did I speak to her on the phone? I might have exchanged voice messages with her, possibly. I mean, I've been speaking to her for well over a year now, on and off. But it was crazy, wasn't it? Because so many people at the time, or not so many people, a very, very small subsection of prats were basically saying, "Oh, you're making this up. You've invented an interview," like as if I'd really bother to do that. And it was crazy listening back to that for like the first time in a year, and then going to what was said in the Thirlwall inquiry, which, as we know, only took place a couple of months back, where her friend said oftentimes in school she would have this blank, almost expressionless face, and she seemed to have or struggle with empathy. And then in her final year examination, her own assessor, which has only been publicly available for the past couple of months, we only found out about this, 8 weeks ago or so, maybe even less. her own assessor put in her assessment that she was quite cold and and expressionless. Exactly the same thing that her friend had told me a year earlier, which I just found, mad. So it was obviously something that's quite evident. I mean, was she particularly expressionless when I saw her in court? Not really. I mean, she was just wide-eyed, blinking a lot, and focusing intently on the questions that were being asked, almost like, I don't know if shock's the right word. Would shock be the right way of describing it? I don't know. Just terror, I suppose. A mixture of terror, wide eyes, and focusing intently on what's being asked of her. That's the best way I can describe it. But again, it's just my own opinion from what I viewed. I'm sure you could probably ask 10 people and they'd give you 10 different answers, but that's what I remember anyway. Yeah, I think Leslie has some sort of membership repellent. I don't know exactly why she hasn't received one yet. It's quite strange, isn't it? Bloody hell, Lenny. Has Leslie got one on this occasion? I can't believe this. Leonard Russell with the 10 gifted memberships.
Oh my God!
That is quite incredible. I think Lenny's won the lottery. He must have done. He must have done. Let's just see who's got... if Leslie hasn't got it this time, then what can we do? What can we do? Pink Pugs. Music Tourette's. The Sleuth. A Bit of a Do. These are all people that have been gifted a membership. Pam Hill. It's literally like gambling, isn't it? It's like a scratch card. Every time you buy a membership or you gift one in the hope that it's going to land on Leslie's lap, and then something else comes out and you keep buying them because you're hoping at some stage Leslie's going to get gifted one. I genuinely think she hasn't got it turned on. She can't have. It just seems incredible that we've only got 100 odd people here. Lenny's gifted 40... I can't even remember how many he's gifted this month. Leslie's been here every time and she hasn't received one. I can't believe it. Anne's got one. Can't believe it. DMV Videos, JD, Music Tourette, Pancho Taylor. I don't get it. I just can't understand it. I reckon she's got it secretly turned off and she's trolling us. I reckon that's what it is. She's got it secretly turned off. But she keeps saying, I can't get this membership. I just can't get one. I can't get one. Doesn't matter what I try. I'm here every night and I just can't get one. Maybe she's tricking us. David Zimmerman's jumping in here now with another 5. I can't believe this. David Zimmerman. Everybody is trying to get Leslie a membership. David Zimmerman with the 5 gifted memberships.
Oh my God!
Thank you so much for that, David. But now I'm going to have a look and see who they've been gifted to. So we've got 60s DJ, Black Cadillac, Steve. Didn't Steve have one before? Or is that someone else? Sophie Lewis Buffton, Jamie Canleaf. Is that it? Oh, so yeah, still again. Yeah, thank you so much for that, though, David. That's so generous. I mean, at this rate, we're just better off chipping in 10 pence each and getting Leslie a membership. I mean, do you take bank transfer? Do you accept bank transfer, Leslie? That's what we need to find out. Do you accept bank transfer? Because it'd be a lot easier, I think, at this rate. Yeah, thanks so much, David. You've gifted 6 tonight. That's incredible. Incredible. So we should have some fairly good numbers tomorrow, shouldn't we, for tomorrow's live stream, all being well. That's it. That's exactly it, Emma. You've rumbled me. Leslie is my plant. What you don't realise is that I'm Leslie on my phone, and I'm slipping in these little messages, you know. It's just in the hope of the odd gifted membership here or there. And then Lenny falls right into the trap. And, yeah, well, I'm rumbled now, aren't I? So, but no, it's definitely not me. I can't believe it. I just cannot believe that Leslie... It's something I'm not doing. Oh, I don't know what the answer is. I honestly don't know what the answer is. If you've got it turned on, which I assume you have, like I say, I think you need to go somewhere on your YouTube account where you click accept memberships. You have to have that selected. And then I just can't understand why you haven't got one. I can't understand with all the gifted memberships that we've had over the past 2 weeks or so. I find it bizarre that you haven't been gifted one. I don't know how to accept gifts. Does anybody know? Does Lenny know? I don't know because I've never ever changed it on my computer, I don't think. Let me have a look. Let me just have a look at my end, see if I can help you out. It might be different for me though, what I'm seeing compared to you. But I'll have a look. Memberships. Memberships. Surely it's in the settings bit, isn't it? General channel, upload defaults, add categories, permissions, community moderation, creator demographics, and agreements. It's not on there then. Let me go back to the chat, see if someone's put it in there. Well, they shouldn't be though, Lindsay. They should go to not just people who are subscribed. It should go to first the people that are watching the live stream, which would be Leslie, and it should go to people that have tuned in to the live stream, which again would be Leslie. So it doesn't just randomly chuck them out to a random 10 people out of 91,000. It chooses, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, I don't think I am, but I think it chooses the people who are watching live, first of all, and then people who have tuned out, or people that have watched it at some stage and then disappeared. But it's not just, random between 91,000 subscribers. I just don't get it. I can't understand why. Go into your account. I've been on there. That's what I'm having a look there now. I don't see anything of where you accept it or turn it on, or... I mean, surely it's on automatically though, isn't it? Because how would other people get them? Surely you don't need to turn it on. It should be on to start with, I would have thought. Strange. Very weird. Thank you, Lucy. Greatly appreciated. Well, I'm just trying to provide... a lot of this is new to me. Reading that tonight is as new to me as it is to you. It's the first time that I've read it. I have these transcripts, but, I don't have all day to sit there reading 90 pages of all this stuff. They're just stored on the computer, and I've used them for the live streams. And that's basically it. I'm just providing the facts of what happened during her original trial. And that's it, But thank you for that. I did say to you before, didn't I, that one of the things I find upsetting, I guess is the best way of putting it, is that the families, the babies' parents don't have a voice because of the anonymity order. They don't have a voice. They can't say what happened during the trial, whereas I have access to the trial transcripts. I can pay for the trial transcripts. I can make other people aware of exactly what took place during the trial. And then you don't need to rely on ill-informed misinformation published in mainstream media, which is absolutely rife. You can just look at what happened and make up your own mind, and that's the end of it. And that's it. Is that what it is? Let's have a look here. Join you. It's definitely not on mine either. I don't know. Leslie has caused absolute chaos in this chat, hasn't she? Absolute chaos. Right, I'm just going to go through some of the chat. Just bear with me a second. Lenny, as a as the managing moderator of this channel, have you got any idea how you turn it on? How you turn on this membership thing or not? Leslie's a troublemaker. She's trolling us, that's what it is. Really, she's got a membership already, but she's hiding it. That's what it is. I think that's what the truth of the matter is. She's actually got a membership, but she's enticing more and more people to keep trying. Roll that dice one more time, roll that dice. And every time, bitter disappointment. Is it because Leslie's got 2 channels? Or, yeah, 2 accounts. Is that what it is? Is that what it is? I definitely am a troublemaker. Yes, but do you have 2 accounts, Leslie? That's the question. Do you have 2 accounts on YouTube or not? Or do you just have 1? And they're bullying you. I can't do it anymore, Lucy. I get told off. I genuinely get told off for playing that sound effect. So I've played it, I think, 3 times tonight, and that's probably too many, I would imagine. I just find it really funny. And I know it's, me interacting with the chat and then dealing with this case, reading the transcripts, are 2 completely separate things. Like, my time with my subscribers, my viewers, is like more of a social interaction, Whereas me being serious and reading the transcripts is a completely different thing. I would never read something from the transcript and then insert the OMG emote or anything like that. I wouldn't do that. But I just love it. I find it hilarious. I find it absolutely hilarious. I'll tell you where I found it. When I first ever heard it was on some call-in show on YouTube about the Idaho murders, and this guy had it, and this bloke rung up and started saying, yeah, well, I spoke to these university guys, and they were asking me, if you were going to end someone's life, how would you do it? And then he just chucked in that OMG sound, and I thought it was just bloody hilarious. So after that, I've been looking for it, and then I found it about a week ago, and then people said, stop playing that sound. You know what people get like. They get very upset when things annoy them. But there we are. What's Totem Crow saying? I need to set up another one to gift gifts, to receive gifts even. Having a channel of your own is called a branded channel, and you cannot receive gifts. Well, no, I've only got 1 channel, and I receive gifts. I've received memberships to other channels, and I've only got 1 account, so that can't be right, because I'm on my branded account, and I've been gifted. I've got a membership gifted to me from Big Jet TV, who watches Planes Land at Heathrow. I've got a gifted membership to that channel, and also to Tom Webster, who covers the Delphi case. I've also got a gifted membership to his channel. So yeah, it can't be that, because I literally only have 1 channel and I still managed to get gifted memberships. So thank you, Laura. I try my best. It's very difficult in real time, especially when they're spaced out like this. I didn't have the time this evening. Usually, why this stuff takes so long is that I get the transcript, I move it onto Word, I space it all out so that the Q and the A is spaced out. I shorten the paragraphs so they're all in line, so they're easier to read, and I colour the answer, like I do with, yellow, you know, for instance, with the answers in yellow. But with this one, I enlarged the font after I'd done all of the above, and it messed up the formatting, so it made it all sort of, yeah, weird. And I didn't have enough time to fix it. So, yeah. Totem Crow. Yeah, no, like I say, I've definitely been gifted memberships, and I've literally just got one channel. Susie M loves a bit of that Big Jet TV. Yeah, I think it's on tomorrow, isn't it? It's on Sundays at 10 o'clock. I usually watch it while I'm eating my bran flakes. Bald and Bankrupt. Yeah, I love that channel as well. I watch a bit of the old Bald and Bankrupt. Yeah. I like a bit of the old Bald and Bankrupt. Absolutely. So Leslie is like the outlier, isn't she? You know, she's the one person who hasn't received the membership for some reason. Mish, do you have to be on your main channel to be gifted, though? I guess you would. I mean, like I say, I've been gifted memberships, and I have one channel. It's my branded account. It's my branded channel. It's my one and only channel, and I get gifted memberships on it. But if I was on a second one, then I don't know. I don't know whether you just won't be able to receive them, whether it will go to your main one. I'm not sure. I really don't know. Yes, very true, humanimal. But yeah, I just don't know what to suggest about Leslie's lack of membership. I really don't know what we can do about that, really, to be perfectly honest. I really don't know. And like I say, tomorrow we'll be taking a look on the member stream of the then ward manager Arian Powell's attendance at the Thirlwall inquiry. Right, Humanimal. Whatever channel you're on, you just have to have the option checked that you can receive memberships. Yeah, I like a bit of that chapter. Don't mind a bit of the old that chapter. Tennis tomorrow. What, are you playing it, Susie? Or are you watching the Australian Open? It's Sinner versus... God, what's his bloody name? Not Alcaraz, he's out. What's that bloke called? The German bloke. Forgot what his bloody name is. Hang on a second. God, what's his name? Zverev, that's it. Sinner versus Zverev. Yeah, I think it's on about 8 o'clock tomorrow. I'll be watching that. I like a bit of the old tennis. Zverev, yeah. Christina's got it. She's on the ball. I love the name Belinda Simcox. She often gets a mention. Yeah, there's another one. Bernadette Butterworth. That's one of my favourites. Bernadette Butterworth. Bernie Butterworth. Oh my God. Bernie Butterworth. Love hedgehogs. Michelle loves hedgehogs. Yeah, I don't mind a hedgehog. I wouldn't eat a whole one though. Let's have a look here. Totem Crow. It didn't have the option showing to accept memberships. I think Lenny was talking me through it in the treehouse. Ooh, saucy. Yeah, Zverev. That's right, innit? Yeah, Sinner versus Zverev. 8:30 UK time. Yeah. That lady, Madison Keys won today, didn't she? She won the women's. She won the women's side. 2-1. I did catch a bit of that this morning, actually. Lenny Russell, hedgehog flavour crisps. That is insane. I'll post screenshots on Discord, and with Lenny's video link, you should be okay. Well, I think people have tried with Leslie, but I don't know. I'm wondering if she's trolling us now. Yeah, I've been into tennis for years. I still play a fair bit, actually, of tennis. Yeah. Okay, what else we got here? I remember hedgehog flavour crisps. Really? No. No, surely not. That can't be a thing. Surely not. You must be having me on. Hedgehog flavour crisps. No. No way. Leslie is IT challenged. Well, what can I say, JB? What can I say? What can I say? There's either a problem with the matrix, with the system, or Leslie's trolling us, or Leslie is IT challenged. Those are the options, aren't they? Take your pick. Might have to do a poll if this continues, just to see, just to see which one comes out on top. Woodstock still trying to help. Leslie, were you on your main channel when you turned it on? Answer the question, Leslie. Leslie is now confessing I'm absolutely useless. Answer the question of Woodstock, Leslie. Were you on your main channel when you turned it on? Mish, I think they were just beef flavoured. It was a gimmick. Woodstock would like to win a membership. Have you been here for the whole stream, Woodstock? We've gifted, well, I should say, Lenny's gifted 10 memberships this evening, and David Zimmerman has, bloody hell, he's gifted 20 actually, that's crazy. And David Zimmerman has kindly donated 6. So we've had 26 new members this evening via Mr. Lenny Russell and David Zimmerman. I'm posting the screenshots in the treehouse. Have a look on there, Leslie. Pork fat and herb flavour, early 1980s. Really? John says, hedgehog crisps, they tasted a bit like squirrel. I can't say I've tasted squirrel either. Museum of Crisps. Right, back to the treehouse we go. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be. Everyone retreat to the treehouse for the late night gossip and whatever else you want to discuss. And as I say, right, okay, so tomorrow, let's just get back on track, shall we, before we finish. Tomorrow will be the members only stream, which will take place at 6 p.m. I'll put further details up regarding that tomorrow morning. And the next public stream, like the one you've watched tonight, will be on Monday at 7:30. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to cover on Monday, but most likely Lucy Letby, possibly something else, but I'll let you know closer to the time. But again, thank you so much to Valor Hawks, to Kaz49, Celeste, HM, JB, Lucy Blue, Lenny Russell for the 20 gifted memberships, David Zimmerman for the 6 gifted memberships, Elspeth Hughes for the £3 super sticker, Alora Mack, and that's it. That's everybody. Brilliant. All right, okay. Thank God we got through that. We did 94 pages or 94 slides this evening, so that's great. Brilliant. And I'll see you all, if you're a member, I will see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And if I don't see you, if you're not a member, I will see you on Monday at 7:30. Again, thank you so much for your attendance this evening, and I'll see you all again in the next stream. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I'll see you again very soon. And I'll leave you with the outro video. Goodbye for now.